The sun cast golden hues across the empire, its rays penetrating the haze of the morning fog, caressing the roofs of houses, the spires of temples, and the stone-paved streets. The sounds of the city merged into a single melody, the hum of voices, the clink of coins, the cooing of pigeons, and the main street of the empire was called Leisure. The eldest daughter of Duke Madeline, a girl with snow-white hair named Olivia Madeline, was lucky enough to arrive at this wonderful place. The maid was telling the lady in the carriage that next week on Monday she would be leaving for the palace again to see His Highness the Crown Prince. The maid was there on Wednesday, and on Monday the carriage was sent again, and in her opinion it was romantic, like a fairy tale. The maid was sure that the hereditary principal definitely loved the mistress, which was why they met so often. Unfortunately, the main character's romantic love was not as wonderful as one might think from the outside, seeing their love. At the appointed time, the princess arrived at the meeting, but she was met by a respectable young gentleman who was holding his arm in a beautiful, sweet lady. She was met by the crown prince of the Frankish Empire, a high-ranking gentleman named Leopold Franz, and he did not expect to see a girl there. A rather complicated lady was tenderly holding his arm. It was Leopold's beloved, Maria Ethel. It seems that today, on the day of the meeting with the princess, the young man has completely lost his head lately, and even forgot the day of the week on which the meeting was scheduled. The crown prince was a man who, from an early age, was intended to marry a little girl of 9 years old. At first, everything was fine. They were just growing up, but neither of them ever had any particular sympathy for each other, and all this could be called a future fictitious marriage. Like many noble families whose union is formed out of necessity, there was never a true, devoted, happy love between Olivia and the crown prince. There were only one-sided feelings here, which the young gentleman did not notice at all, while his beloved languished in the torment of anticipation. Despite this, the heroine continues to hope, and every time she thought that if she puts in a little more effort, maybe one day he will pay attention to her. He decided to make up for his mistake with a new date and suggested meeting on Monday. In love, the heroine also became naive, and she met him on the day of his 11th birthday. When they first met as children, Leopold was interested in his new friend and even thought that her name was the most beautiful in the world. Many years have passed since the first date could finally take place, to which Leopold himself invited her, promising to send a carriage for the girl on Monday. And today, sitting in a luxurious carriage on the way to the prince, Olivia was sure that her father would not be incredibly happy to hear this news. Perhaps today they will actually be able to have a pleasant conversation, despite the many years they have spent together. In the heart of the imperial capital, in a wide square, people were slowly gathering. Merchants were offering exotic goods from distant lands, silks from the eastern provinces, spices from the southern islands. Olivia couldn't even remember the last time she walked through the empire's main square and simply enjoyed life. Everything here turned out to be so incredibly beautiful that even the maid herself could not take her eyes off the beautifully cozy, decorated streets. In one of the ateliers, they noticed Madame Pluto's new dress from the new collection, and she looked too beautiful. Mustard suggested that this dress would definitely suit the lady, and the lady asked to tell this boutique to come to the mansion next week. The lady was delighted. Could the lady finally sew herself such a magnificent dress, and it seemed the maid was even much happier with her mistress. She asked how long she would continue to take care of Lady Essel alone and continue to wear only such dark dresses. She was sure that bright colors would also suit the lady, and it was probably time for her to change her image. Her sister always wore colorful dresses, and as soon as she thought about it, she immediately thought of her. Now she was still not ready to transform, and promised the maid that she would definitely buy this dress for herself a little later. The Crown Prince's bride has been acting quite contented, and today she will simply check her mailbox and head inside. While the ladies were walking down the street, some of the girls had already noticed them, that very princess bastard. The ladies discussed that the princess was clearly giving off some kind of vicious aura, and it must be for a reason that she became the bride of His Highness the Crown Prince. Everyone was sure that she did not get this role out of love, and many considered her a frivolous lady. Olivia didn't care at all about the stupid rumors, and she asked the maid not to listen to the ridiculous nonsense, as if it was the first time it happened. The maid was worried the opinion of aristocrats in society was always important, and it was impossible not to pay attention to it. Olivia didn't want to make a fuss and decided to leave as quickly as possible so as not to leave the girls with any more reason to talk. These ladies always whisper like that among themselves, and the maid didn't understand because her tongue would have fallen out long ago from such stupidity. She asked me to ignore this nonsense and to go check the mail, because there should be a special letter there today. Indeed, in the mailbox lay Lady Olivia's only secret hobby, and that hobby was letters. It was a complete coincidence that she began corresponding with a knight whose name she didn't know. About a year ago, after Jade's younger brother was sent off to war, Olivia, wanting to help in some way, sent humanitarian aid. Jade returned everything she sent, so deciding to give it a try, she sent the items under the fictitious name Liv Green. She thought it was some kind of mistake, but it soon became clear that all the humanitarian aid under a false name had not been returned. And from then on, after the lady started sending humanitarian aid under a different name, she never returned. On the one hand, it was good that he simply accepted it, even if it was sent under a completely false name. One day, the lady received a letter from an unknown sender, who thanked the girl named Liv with great gratitude for the help she had provided. The lady read every line with interest. On the one hand, it was an incredibly warm, heartfelt letter, but unfortunately, it was addressed to another person. A whole year had passed since then, and since then letters from her young master had been arriving regularly. Although they stopped about 6 months ago and the heroine hoped that everything was fine with him, perhaps he was busy winning victories, but now she would like the letter to arrive today. In any unclear situation, she always had the support of a caring maid, who at every opportunity tried to calm her mistress down. With a joyful smile, she suggested checking the mail and going to get a beautiful diary, but suddenly loud screams were heard near the girls. A young man stood nearby and tried to clarify the payment issue. The maid was surprised that they were still charging for the ride. Everything should have returned to normal by now, but the same old notions still persisted in the town. The girls were forbidden to come so close to the tracks, but Olivia did not listen to the knights and headed off towards the road on her own. She didn't even hear the maid shouting at her loudly, but now the heroine was pursuing the most important goal. She came close to the young people and loudly asked them to stop their rude conversation. The young men grinned. Some unfamiliar girl stood in front of them, and they turned to the aristocrat. "I want to prove my point." One of the guys chuckled. Apparently the aristocrat has someone to rely on, but her knights are nothing, and she can stay out of this story. But the fragile aristocrat turned out to be a completely different person, and with just one order she asked for the scoundrels to be captured. The crowd of young people never expected that the aristocrats would point sharp swords at them right now, making them their hostages. It all happened so suddenly, none of the guys expected that some girl would come and put them in their places. The gang leader was trying to figure out what to do next. He had only one option left, to grab a small sonic knife from his pocket. It didn't matter whether it would help now or not, but he imagined it at the throat of a gentleman in a long gray cloak. He deliberately touched his neck and released a couple of drops of blood so that everyone would understand how serious his intentions were. The stupid, naive young man didn't even understand who he was approaching right now and who he dared to threaten. Strange things were happening on the street of a small town. The knights were busy with something, but for some reason they weren't doing anything in particular. No one could figure out what had happened there, so Olivia decided to step forward to figure it all out. The young man in the dark gray cloak probably wanted to say something, but there was not a drop of fear in his eyes. Olivia thought it would be a normal, modest squabble between knights, but the atmosphere around was becoming increasingly tense. This could not be, and the young master, who was held tightly by the robber, was still under the threat of the Dagger Island. The young man asked the stranger not to move under any circumstances so as not to injure him, but in reality it was unlikely that he actually intended to do so. He continued to hold him tightly as scarlet drops of blood flowed down the master's snow-white apron, and he remained silent. None of the people understood what game each other was playing, but the tension in each of them rose to the maximum. One of the knights managed to lay down the main criminal, who was now lying face down on the cold concrete floor, looking angrily at his offender. The knights immediately rushed to the master to see if he was all right and if he had received any serious injuries. Olivia looked at the strange situation the whole time, and the maid did not leave her side. At that moment, an unexpectedly unknown gentleman walked straight towards Olivia because he probably noticed her worries. The first thing the polite lady did was ask if everything was okay with the stranger, because the bandit had just put a gun to his throat. Her heart was beating wildly like a caged bird. Lady Olivia was worried about the gentleman who had just had a knife put to his throat, but he was fine and simply couldn't stand up straight, falling on top of the lady. There was confusion and a strange, absent-minded look in his eyes. He tried to say something, but the words got stuck in his throat. The young man confessed that his legs simply gave way. He was in a difficult position and accidentally fell on the girl, and now he was ready to thank her for this merit at any cost. His legs actually gave way unexpectedly, and he himself didn't even imagine that he could lose his balance. At that very second, he simply panicked. He didn't know what to do, but right in front of him there was a noble lady who supported him. If it were not for the lady's unkind help, sir, you would probably have found yourself in a different situation, and everything would have turned out differently. Then something unexpected happened. A tear flowed down the gentleman's velvety cheek, and the girls couldn't even believe that he was really crying. The gentleman was ready to repay this kindness at any cost, but the tear that he squeezed out of his eye was still incomprehensible. Olivia looked closely at the unknown gentleman and tried to understand who was in front of her. Judging by his clothes, he was definitely an aristocrat, but who was he? The heroine had never seen information about such a man in the Noble Almanac, so she had no idea who this red-eyed stranger was who appeared in a small town where everyone knew each other. The heroine tried to remember something about red eyes and black hair, and something began to emerge in her memory. And looking again at the man standing in front of her, she realized that in front of her stood the very same Grand Duke Vikander who was famous throughout the empire. He was the one who won every battle he fought, recently winning the war with Caperi that lasted over 3 years. Hero and ruthless Lord of the North, Edwin Vikander Lowell, Duke of the Cold Lands. They said that this man was a cruel killer who inspired terror in everyone who met him. Olivia looked at the cute young man and couldn't believe that he was the most brutal warrior in the empire. His kind red eyes and friendly demeanor did not betray the true villain in him. And the heroine definitely believed that it couldn't be that it was him, but now she was simply glad to help him. The gentleman was even immediately ready to thank his savior and could not believe that he had met him so quickly. It's hard to believe this man walked alone in such a dangerous place. If he didn't come with a mercenary, it would have been with a knight. He was probably one of the newly minted nobles. An imperial aristocrat would never have approached a lady so casually, because all her life she had been called a dirty blood, a non-entity, a pathetic bride of the crown prince. Olivia admitted that she was perfectly fine and wanted to know where the honorable gentleman had lost his knight. There were an incredible number of knights, all located near the fountain, where many carriages were located. The girl immediately looked at the fountain and sighed, because this place seemed painfully familiar to her. It was the Garden of the Four Gardens, the most famous place in the center of the empire, where noble aristocrats gathered and could spend time comfortably on benches among the greenery. The gentleman said that he could go on alone. It was not close at all, and the lady definitely should not get lost. And if only he had met his knight, he could have given her precious things, and the heroine would have immediately accepted such a kind gesture of his attention. That's why the young man immediately offered to meet quickly, and after these words, Olivia definitely couldn't refuse. Of course, she wanted to say yes, but unfortunately she was already almost engaged, and the young man insisted one more time. Olivia looked into his eyes and understood that nothing held her back in this life, and even more so, no love bound her. The young man warned that if such a day ever came, he very much hoped that the girl would allow him to repay her kindness. The lady looked at the venerable gentleman with enchanted eyes and could not understand how fate had brought them together today. Most of all, she was afraid of the unknown man because she knew absolutely nothing about him. Still, this man seemed somehow mysterious or interesting to her, so she couldn't say no to him. And it was much nicer than going back to my supposed boyfriend, who had been having an affair with his girlfriend for a long time. She had never heard such pleasant words even from her fiancé, and on the one hand she felt very pleased. On the other hand, the heroine tried to collect her thoughts, because this man is simply kind, because he does not know who she really is. Olivia decided to make her high standards clear from the start, and she wouldn't accept anything she didn't like. Perhaps after these words the young man should have disappeared without a trace, but he only extended his hand to her and agreed. The gentleman admitted that he always strives for the best, which is why he always has plenty of the most valuable and unusual things. Now the lady can wait a little and prepare for the upcoming date to finally get to know each other better. The carriage, along with the other young men, quickly drove away as soon as they realized who they were dealing with. One of the guys was outraged at the outfit he was wearing, and he felt like a clown. I don't understand what this man was up to this time. His attention was completely focused on the gentleman because it was the first time he had seen him with such an expression on his face. The assistant couldn't understand what the mixture of emotions on his face meant because he had never seen Vikander like this before. And all this in relation to the daughter of the head of the emperor's party, whom he hates with every fiber of his soul. The assistant asked what had happened to the young lady, or perhaps he was simply taking it out on Madeline while the deputy commander of the Jade was away. No one understood what was going on here at all. The aristocrat had appeared for a reason, and the young man immediately noticed her. For 10 years now, by order of this damned emperor, His Grace the Duke has been fighting on the front lines, and he must not have any contact with the young princess who grew up in the capital. Second in command, Jade, Madeline's second son, is ready to argue about anything, but introducing the second in command's sister is out of the question. Then why did the gentleman treat her somehow differently, and Assistant Winster still could not understand his behavior? Suddenly, the gentleman declared that he was not going to return to the palace right now. They were supposed to be heading to the palace right now for an important meeting, and even Winster didn't expect them to go anywhere else. In any case, when he arrives, they will talk about him giving his services to someone or swearing allegiance, but it's all nonsense. The emperor still won't die. He said this to the whole street. It was definitely impolite on the part of the gentleman, and the assistant hinted at this. If you think about it, it's true that none of them really wanted to go there. As before, many of the master's assistants were all prepared, and the Duke's family had long since become strong. Once they return the late Duchess's rock crystal mine, everything will be as his lordship wishes. The main thing is that everything will turn out exactly as the honorable gentleman himself wants, and his plans have long been outlined. The residence looked luxurious, with huge arched windows letting in streams of sunlight that reflected off the polished marble floor, creating a feeling of unearthly radiance. When the ladies finally returned to the residence, they saw an incredibly cute bouquet on the table in the living room with a note stuck in it. Perhaps it was His Highness the Crown Prince who sent the lady flowers, but this was still unknown. It was an amazing coincidence, and taking the lovely bouquet in her hands, Olivia could not stop admiring it. These were exactly the same bouquets of multicolored small flowers, the same ones that the knight had sent her a year ago. The message had a card and an inscription on it, and Olivia wondered what might be written inside. The words of the note read that it would be useful for the Duchess to know the meaning of this flower, in case she does not know, then let her write it down along with the flower. The meaning of this flower is the end of my soul belongs to you, and the man looked forward to the next Monday. This note once again proved that the flowers were indeed sent from the person she had met just that day. Mustard was incredibly curious about what was written in the note, after which the lady's face blossomed like a fragrant rose. Yes, the Leopold she knew was just like that, a sweet man who chooses flowers knowing their meaning for someone like her. It might be because of her shameful half-blood nickname, and when this situation is resolved, magic might happen. He will love her, but definitely if she puts in the effort. Someone once told her that if you put in the effort, you can definitely achieve anything. These words belonged to her mother. She always called her Olivia a poor girl. Olivia was a special child. Her last name was Madeline, and she was never supposed to forget who she was. The reason why Madeline's family became a laughingstock is supposedly all because of a little girl who once displeased someone. The street of tramps called Toning Bell was famous for its wickedness, and no aristocrat ever set foot there. It was in this dark place that a young girl named Olivia was born and lived there from early childhood. Unfortunately, her fate was decided long ago. She was not destined to become a happy little girl, because she was haunted by terrible tragedies from childhood. As a result, even at such a young age, she instinctively understood that her mother's light, the only happiness of her childhood, was slowly fading before her eyes. They spent every day together, never leaving each other for a minute, because even then the little heroine understood that she would never see her the same again. One day, Mother told me that her father would soon come and she should listen to her carefully. Once she said that her father had died, it turned out that she had to lie. In her new life, Olivier has brothers and sisters she doesn't know, so she might feel uncomfortable in her new family. Before her death, Mother promised that it would be much more comfortable and happier there than now, so the girls need to make every effort. She promised that when the baby grows up, she will definitely succeed if she really wants it. The mother, with tears in her eyes, hugged her beloved daughter, realizing that soon they would say goodbye forever, and happiness would await her in another place. Soon, poor Olivia was standing in the pouring rain next to her mother's tombstone, and from that moment on, a new life truly began for her. While she was crying bitterly, someone suddenly approached her and asked what the baby's name was. The man arrived as soon as he received the letter, and they went to the place that Mom had mentioned, and it turned out to be very large and luxurious. It was a radical departure from the poor slums where little Olivia had spent her entire childhood. On the same day, a venerable gentleman arrived, surrounded and accompanied by knights. And it was this stranger, whom she had been waiting for a long time, who she had thought about all her childhood, and who was supposed to become her father. When Olivia looked at the stranger with her eyes and asked if he was really her real father, the young man only grinned. It certainly wasn't clear from his eyes that he had long dreamed of seeing the little girl, and it seemed that these people were completely different. The little girl was incredibly irritated by this, because she felt with all her heart that no one had ever been waiting for her here. And the moment simply came when she had to find herself in a completely unfamiliar place and live with strangers. Young Olivia entered the luxurious palace and was surprised at how she could have come from the poor slums to such luxury. The entire hall was decorated with luxurious flowers. There was a huge fountain in the center, and the stairs were carved from gold. A respectable lady approached her and called the girl by a completely different name, Gio, which frightened the little girl even more. The gentleman turned to Lady Hazel, who had previously said that she would never send a message to the palace. The lady needed a girl to send in her place, and this mansion held terrible secrets. Young Olivia didn't understand at all why she ended up here and what child Hazel was talking about. As soon as all the maids saw the new baby, they immediately started whispering behind her back. No one expected this from the Duke. Madeline's blood really flows in her veins. Her lush, silver hair, green eyes, and how could such base blood be mixed with the noble Madeline? The venerable gentleman asked all the servants to stop idle chattering and to rather focus on their work. A man named Albert turned out to be the butler of Madeline's house, and he offered to first escort the little girl to his room so that she could rest. Life has changed completely since that day. The maids continued to discuss every day, calling Mother a street dancer, but she does not look like a young lady at all. For the maids, commoners were all the same, so even the Duke did not look in her direction. It was unknown who the woman was who was destined to become the nanny of this uneducated girl. The girl was immediately introduced to a new personal maid who had a very strict disposition. As she combed her tangled hair that evening, the little girl confessed that she wanted to go outside that day. The soft comb touched her snow-white curls, but the darling still didn't know something. Her appearance upset the Duke, and she asked if the little girl still didn't know that it was because of her that the Duchess had fallen ill. The maid assured that it was because of her alone that such a noble family of dukes had once become a laughingstock, and it was impossible to pretend that this did not concern the little girl. The maid kept saying that it seemed like no one had ever told their darling the real truth about what had happened that day. The fact that the Duke and Duchess, who had never quarreled, began to quarrel, the elder gentleman walked around as if he had lost his bearing. The younger gentleman began to cry at night, and poor Ursula, from a precious only daughter, turned into a second. And the maid claimed that all this was because a certain Olivia had appeared in the house, whose appearance no one had expected. After thinking about it, the maid came to the conclusion that perhaps it was all because of this hair, since it was thanks to it that the baby got here. Olivia, without a second thought, she decided to cut off the little girl's luxurious snow-white curls. No matter how much Olivia didn't want to cut her hair now, the maid still did her hair as she saw fit and simply cut it. She assured that the Duke and Duchess would not suffer looking at such hair, and the little girl should already understand this perfectly well. Instead of long, luxurious hair, the little girl now had a short haircut, and it certainly couldn't make her happy. The lady declared that the little girl now looked exactly as befitted her vile condition. Olivia's mother always admired her unusual hair color, its silkiness and silvery sheen, and loved absolutely everything about her. Now the little girl found herself completely alone in a new house, where on the first day her beloved long hair was brazenly cut off. On the outside everything looked just fine, but that evening the baby felt incredibly hungry. She decided to go out and find something to eat, and then head back straight away so as not to hear her nanny's menacing voice. Unfortunately, it was so dark in the hallway that the little girl didn't even realize how she tripped and fell right on the floor. She was afraid that someone might hear and come, and that some kind of punishment would await her in the future. Most of all, she dreamed that in this situation her beloved mother would appear before her, who would carefully hand her over to her and simply hug her. Little Olivia imagined her mother comforting her in her arms, and at that moment, despite her sadness, she was immensely happy. After all, she always had a wonderful, warm, tender relationship with her mother, and she was the only person she could trust. Every evening they spent together, her mother caringly kissed her on the forehead, and at that time the little girl was simply unrealistically happy. The girl was happy when she heard her ringing voice, when she saw her sweet smile. Everything was different, and the little girl understood that no one would come to her again, and would never again hug her with such trepidation. While she tried to get up quietly so that no one would notice her, the silhouette of a lady appeared in the distance in the corridor. It was the lady. She looked at him with bewilderment as to why the little girl was lying on the cold floor. At the sight of the Duchess, the little girl was so frightened that she seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. The Duchess looked closely at the little girl, who said that she had simply gone to find something to eat, and had fallen. The maid's voice still rang in her mind, insisting that the Duchess had fallen ill precisely because of her. Olivia began to cry that she had suddenly caught my eye and appeared here without knowing her place. And the fact that the Duchess fell ill precisely because of her worried her very much, and she was ready to simply run away from here. The Duchess was silent for a while, and suddenly asked who had told Olivia such terrible information. She admitted that these words belonged to the new personal nanny, and it seemed that the Duchess was still angry. Olivia was afraid she shouldn't leave her room in the evening, just as the nanny had warned her. Sitting on the cold marble floor, polished to a shine, the girl seemed to feel a fleeting support from the most important lady of this house. She was afraid to even look her in the eyes, but the caring lady touched Olivia's face and asked if she could stand up. Right behind her, little Olivia seemed to see the ghost of her mother, just as caring and kind. Perhaps it was some kind of sign. The girl decided to trust the lady, whom she saw for the first time in her life. Olivia went to get herself some food, and soon she was sitting at the table with treats that she had never eaten in her life. The Duchess sat in front of her and asked the little girl to eat well, because if she went hungry, she would never grow up. She asked to eat everything, even her food, if you are hungry, so that you will definitely grow up healthy. Olivia eagerly and with a huge appetite pounced on the delicious pumpkin soup, and the first thing she tried was a fragrant piece of bread. All this time, the Duchess closely watched the behavior of the little girl, who behaved like a real savage. She asked why the baby's hair was like this now, because a few days ago her hair was quite long and neat. While sipping delicious hot tea, the girl admitted that it was not her decision to do this. On the very first day, the personal maid they provided her with cut all her hair and told her that was exactly how it should be. She said that because of the snow-white hair, people speak ill of the palace residents. They must definitely shave it off, and only little Olivia is to blame for everything. The girl was upset that she had left the room without permission, and with tears in her eyes, she sincerely asked the Duchess for forgiveness. Now a real miracle happened. The Duchess stroked the baby's face and asked her to remember one thing: it was not her fault, and she was never guilty of anything. The girl couldn't believe her ears, and she was sure the Duchess would definitely be angry. In front of her sat a kind lady with a sweet, charming smile who certainly did not wish her any harm. After her words, the little girl began to think that she really wasn't guilty of anything and hadn't done anything to feel terrible. It was definitely not time to fall asleep yet, so as not to get it from the nanny, but the girl's eyes closed so quickly that the last thing she saw in front of her was the Duchess's face. And after these words, the Duchess decided that the nanny did not need to be brought to her immediately to sort out what had happened. From that day on, everything changed as if by magic. Olivia got a beautiful haircut and was dressed in a luxurious dress. In the morning, the girl came out with a new hairstyle and in a beautiful dress, and the Duchess asked the little girl to say hello to someone. Hiding behind her was a young lady named Ursula, who was supposed to be her sister. The little girl was still very young. She barely even understood the meaning of the word sister, and was very surprised when her mother told her about it. Could Olivia call such a lovely girl, who looked like a soft, fluffy cloud, by name? I was going to tell Olivia another very important thing that happened just yesterday after their meeting. She sent that same nanny away and asked her to never listen to what she said again. Ursula was now her sister, and she could be called by her first name. The Duchess carefully stroked the baby's head and suggested that they all go for a walk together to meet their new little sister. Holding her baby girl in her arms, the Duchess took Olivia around the luxurious mansion and told her that she now had 2 older brothers. The eldest brother is already 11 years old. His name is Conrad. The second is only 8, and his name is Mr. Jade. Their portraits hung on the wall, and from now on Olivia could call them brothers. They both studied at the academy, but were supposed to return today. One of them, the youngest, named Jade, suddenly entered the living room, and the Duchess greeted him joyfully. She lovingly hugged her sweet bunny Jade and asked him if he had a good time. For some reason, the boy was unhappy. His mother herself suddenly sent him to his grandmother, and he resisted this for a very long time. As Olivia looked at the new family, her heart was filled with pain on one side, and on the other, with a huge bitterness of despair for her beloved mother. Before the boy had time to tell everything, he immediately noticed the appearance of a new stranger in their house. The Duchess told them about the girl Olivia, who has now become a younger sister and will live with them. So for Sella, she now remained the older sister, and the boy laughed loudly, greeting Olivia. At first glance, it seemed that my brother was definitely a stupid fool who still didn't understand anything at all. But there was another brother who was not at all happy with the appearance of another child in the family, and did not consider her his relative at all. A menacing grin appeared on the face of the young gentleman, who declared that the girl was not his sister at all, but a dirty half-breed. The Duchess tried to calm the angry teenager, who was still filled with childish feelings. Olivia felt very unpleasant and offended. She had just arrived and hadn't said anything yet, but her older brother was already angry with her. The maids discussed every day the arrival of the baby in the new family. The mistress was not going out for the first time in a long time, and was it really because of this that she decided to go out? Rumor has it that the gentleman decided to go on an exciting walk, something their family hadn't done for a long time. The Duchess decided to go about her business and asked the maids and butler to keep a close eye on the children. This time, Jade was surprised why Mommy didn't kiss Olivia, who was now also part of their family. Brother and sister argued. Olivia also calls her mistress dryly and formally, and if Olivia is her sister, isn't Olivia's mother too? It was all too confusing for little children, but little Olivia didn't even try to understand. She simply stroked the head of the newest member of the family with care, and even so, little Olivia felt enormous support. The children wished their mother a safe journey. She had not traveled anywhere for a long time, and probably now she had urgent matters to attend to. Little Olivia still felt the gentle touch on her head, and her body was getting warmer with each passing second. She couldn't help but notice Conrad's menacing look, which was categorically opposed to this idea. After this, the little girl had no more opportunity to receive a kiss from the Duchess, and the children were especially amused at the speech when she left. The 3 of them drew beautiful pictures of the amethyst princess in the land of gems, who had the most beautiful sister. This princess's name was Emerald. Her green eyes sparkled so brightly, and she looked like a small olive. Finally, the drawing was ready, where the prince and princesses, living in the land of gems, lived very, very happily together with a crowd of topazes. Olivia looked at the beautiful drawings and didn't even notice how large tears started flowing from her eyes. The children did not understand why their little sister was the only one who started crying, and they immediately began to worry because they were just having a good time. They tried to cheer her up because each of them felt sad when their older sister cried. Olivia finally felt like she wasn't alone, but the thought that she might have a family was shattered and didn't last a day. All this happened that same evening. When the moonlight fell through the huge window, loud screams of a young man could be heard in the corridor, who again accused Olivia. The boy shouted that if this impudent girl had not come to their family, everything would have been completely different. The girl didn't understand that just a couple of hours ago they had been having fun and laughing, and now Conrad was saying that everything would have been fine without her. He shouted furiously at the little girl, assuring her that she was the cause of all the troubles, and it would have been better if she had never appeared in their lives. She was supposedly to blame for what happened to his mother, but little Olivia, with her frightened eyes, still didn't understand anything. A terrible tragedy had occurred, but the girl had no idea why he was yelling at her now. Soon a terrible tragedy occurred, which no one could even imagine, and in a dark hall, people in black robes bent over the coffin. People whispered, "What a pity, she was going to get a divorce," but on the way from her parents' house the carriage overturned. Perhaps all this was for the sake of the children, and little Ursula was still calling for her mother, but it was already late in the evening and she could not understand where she had gone. Olivia held the baby's hand while she looked in different directions and still waited with tears in her eyes for her appearance. Suddenly, she confessed to her little sister that something was definitely wrong here. Her mother still hadn't come, and she missed her incredibly. The next morning, the maids in the baby's room were running back and forth, calling a doctor, and someone was quickly carrying a wet towel. The little girl lay in her bed in tears, clutching the blanket convulsively, and did not understand where her beloved mother had disappeared to. The terrible pain and despair were perfectly understandable to Olivia, because she had once said goodbye to her mother forever in the same way. The little girl cried bitterly and asked her sister why her mother hadn't come yet, and whether she had simply forgotten about them. Olivia tried to support the baby. She gently took her hand and asked for forgiveness for everything that happened. While she was carefully calming her down, a strange gentleman appeared in the room, from whom an incredibly dark aura emanated. Olivia immediately became scared and looked at the stranger, feeling how darkness filled the whole room. He grabbed her arm abruptly and dragged her into another room while Olivia continued to kick and struggle. The sister sat down and asked to let the girl go, but the maids did not allow her to get up in her bed. No one let her help while the little girl, lying on the bed, saw how Olivia, who had just been supporting her, was taken away. They went into another room and the enraged man threw the girl right against the chest of drawers, where she hit her head painfully. Despite this, Olivia asked the menacing man to leave her and wanted to go to her little sister as soon as possible to console her. The menacing man was as scary as something out of the worst horror movie, and he asked her to never say her daughter's name with his dirty mouth again. The girl saw this man for the first time, and she didn't even suspect that here they would dare to treat her so cruelly. The man insisted that if the little girl hadn't run into Mrs. Hazel in the hallway on that fateful dark day, then she would have known nothing, would still be alive, and nothing else would have happened to her. The man cried bitterly, his heart torn by hatred for this little girl, because he was sure that she was to blame for everything. In the end, one strange incident when they met the lady in the corridor destroyed her family overnight. If the Duchess had not gone to divorce her other husband because of the new little girl, she would still be alive. Just last night, the Duchess was alive and well, and Olivia felt her warm touch. No one could even imagine that the meeting could be the last, and the mistress would never kiss the little lady again. And now her husband held in his hands a bloody portrait of his beloved, and that tragic incident killed Mrs. Hazel. The enraged man left the room. Little Olivia sat on the floor, not understanding what she was guilty of. She was ready to simply disappear from this world forever, so that no one would ever see her again, so that she could never bring pain to anyone again. Estella had already become a close person to her, and the venerable gentleman sat near her bed, trying to soothe the baby's pain. He asked Estella not to cry anymore, but the girl was only worried about where her little sister was now. The man only wanted that you, girl, under no circumstances transfer this misfortune to little Estella. The girl wondered if all this had happened because of her, because she had come here, but her mother had always said that she was not to blame for anything. Everything changed overnight, as if a bright stained glass window had shattered into 1,000 pieces, leaving only pain and confusion. The lady was deep in thought about something, and without noticing it, she became immersed in strong emotional experiences about her childhood past. Lady Olivia was already a grown-up lady. Even the maid noticed her worried face. By the way, dinner had already been prepared for a long time and was slowly cooling down, so the heroine needed to go downstairs as quickly as possible. The whole family was still gathered, the older brother Conrad, sister Estella, and Olivia sitting opposite them. The older brother grinned. His younger sister hadn't eaten even half of it yet, even though she had promised she was ready to eat a whole pig. When preparing for a debut, you need to eat exactly this much, and Jade sent a letter early in the morning that his sister would probably like to see. If this was a letter about a debut, the girl immediately shoved a huge piece of pork into her mouth, which was incredibly delicious today. After she finally started eating, the young man made sure to promise to give his sister the letter. The family had been waiting for news from Jade's brother for too long, and everyone was excited about the new information. Only Olivia thought and believed every day that her brother was completely fine and would return safe and sound. The excellent knight Jade volunteered to go to war a year and a half ago and went to the southern border, and they have not seen each other since. Other knights get promotions and vacations and return safely, but Jay only sent letters occasionally. Olivia decided to ask her older brother one question that interested her, but she was a little afraid to say it. She plucked up her courage and asked if she had received any letters during all this time, but her brother replied that he knew nothing. Olivia allegedly did not have separate letters because no one still considers her a member of their family. Perhaps Jay had set everything up on purpose so that the girl would continue to feel like an outcast in this company. He stated that it seemed that this was not the case, and indeed there was not a single letter for Olivia. Olivia just decided to come up with an idea the gentleman was probably just very busy, and when he returned, he would definitely tell her everything. There was another interesting topic on this site that my little sister was incredibly eager to hear. Olivia's older sister was about to make her debut. She should have already been preparing, and the younger sister was incredibly interested in this topic. As it turned out, preparations for the debut had long been completed, but for some reason this information did not bring any joy to Olivia. The heroine didn't even prepare for this event, although she understood perfectly well that it was incredibly important for the family, and the girl had to experience her first debut. The ideal debut she would like to attend had already appeared in her mind several times. Luxurious halls decorated with precious chandeliers, red carpets, and impeccably dressed aristocrats. Her brother probably had a completely different idea of the debut, but he had never talked about it before. The heroine prepared herself and was confident that her debut would be perfect, just like in the most magical fairy tale. She starved herself to lose weight, had perfect hair, incredible makeup, and an incredibly expensive dress. Indeed, you were her perception and everything was just perfect, but it only remained to find out how it would actually happen. The lady asked Leopold if the first grand waltz of the aristocrats was really about to begin. A young, respectable gentleman immediately approached the lady and wanted to offer her the first dance. The aristocrats were shocked because no one expected that anyone would even decide to invite a simpleton mudblood. Until Leopold invited not her but a marquise from the family of the Marquis of Noradian to the first dance. All this time, Olivia knew that Leopold was reluctant to go to the engagement with her, that due to the aristocrats' concerns about the alliance of the crown prince and the imperial faction, he might invite another lady to dance. That's exactly what happened at the event, so the young man decided to choose a completely different girl. The aristocrats began to whisper, "It seems that the relationship between the Duke's daughter and His Highness is not very good. If this is how she is treated, then now they can breathe a sigh of relief." That day, the heroine begged, asked every second for this debut to be the most wonderful in her life. There were plenty of aristocrats around, handsome, noble men, titled, and with a lot of money. Olivia prayed that at least someone, anyone, would just talk to her, but unfortunately, everyone pretended that the girl didn't exist there. Looking around at the handsome men, of whom there were more than enough, but unfortunately, there was not one who would approach her first. She sincerely wanted to be noticed, but deep down she felt that at a social event she would simply be disgraced. She just needed to smile. After a disappointing evening, the girl thought about it for a long time and looked incredibly mysterious. At the family dinner, she thought for a long time about the debut ball, and only such thoughts were spinning in her head. The lady turned to Sister Acella and suggested that the young lady would surely handle it much better. The young lady was incredibly happy when she heard praise from her little sister, and even did not believe it a little. The lady immediately suggested that next time she go with her to the debut ball to see how everything was arranged there. She had a different plan. She was going to send her little sister there and stay at home so as not to be in that terrible place anymore. The lady confessed that she was going to do some business in the palace and asked the young lady to delight all the aristocrats with her beauty. If Olivia is really busy, there's nothing to be done, and her brother promised to find a good escort for the lady to the event. Immediately after this news, the young lady quickly began preparing for her first case, because today she had to look gorgeous. The older brother decided to have a serious talk with Olivia, and he probably didn't like a lot of things about her behavior. He rudely told the girl that he had recently made it clear that she should stay as far away from her as possible. Despite all his threats, the girl felt that her younger sister needed female support more than ever. The young man was perplexed as to whether the lady really wanted to put her little sister on the same level as herself, and he often repeated to her that she was not Madeline at all. He called the young lady an ordinary member of the family and insisted that she was not their legal relative at all, and that she could be called just an ordinary girl from the street. Olivia never believed that her brother would ever love her, and as he got older, he treated her worse and worse. The lady left the dining room silently, because it was useless to continue the meaningless conversation. She held herself proudly and in a sweet voice wished her evil brother a good day and then went off to sort out her life. Carden slammed the glass wineglass down on the table with all his might, and his hands began to shake violently with anger. To him, Olivia had always been a disaster, someone who got in the way the moment she stepped foot in that house. He was sure that it was because of this dirty girl that his family had collapsed, because of her that his mother had died, who had left in a carriage immediately after meeting her. The young man was ready to tear her to pieces, but even this was not enough for him, and his anger grew more and more with every second. It is she, instead of little Ursula, who must one day go to the Ice Palace. Despite the girl's kind soul, for him she was just a dirty half-breed Madeline, who was awarded a lucky ticket to a luxurious life. A letter arrived from my younger brother. He had a few issues to resolve, and he promised to return to his home soon. The gentleman fought bravely every day for the good of the empire, and soon he was supposed to be allowed to go home. Before this, Edvind Vikander was supposed to have an important meeting with the great son of the empire himself. Some rumors had already reached the emperor about how bravely the young man had shown himself in all the battles. The young man mentally prepared himself to listen to the greatest man in the empire, but he was incredibly proud of his honor. They say that in this great battle the Grand Duke was always in the vanguard, and in every battle he was as beautiful as ever. Bowing his head low in respect before the emperor, the young man decided that his words sounded too kind to him. Grand Duke Vikander, and according to the emperor, it took 10 years to tame this puppy. They were incredibly arrogant, hiding behind the oath of vassalage to the first emperor. Now these people are just the emperor's dogs, which he can send to places where only death awaits young people. By the way, the Grand Duke will soon officially assume his legal position, and a magnificent triumphal feast must be arranged. Suddenly, the emperor declared that it was time to marry and hire an heir, but the Duke had not thought about this at all yet. Laughing, the emperor simply asked him to listen and not to jump to any conclusions. The crystal mine was already in the hands of the princess, and although it has long since exhausted itself, this mine is the last legacy of the late Grand Duchess, the same famous crystal mine that was renowned throughout all empires. The mine received as compensation for the disappearance of the previous Grand Duke on the battlefield, and the only noose keeping the Grand Duke on a short leash. Formal ownership is very important, but if the Duke marries the princess, it will become even easier to use, and finally the mine will remain the property of the empire. The emperor understood that if he was destined to own this mine, it would remain under his care forever. He would never again be a free man, bound by the bonds of the emperor and his commercial affairs. The next day, from early morning, postal workers in the small town of the empire delivered fresh newspapers to all the surrounding areas, shouting about a huge sensation. It was an incredibly calm morning as Olivia sat at her desk, thinking about her future life. She had never worn precious jewelry before, but now she was wearing a pearl necklace, and she couldn't believe that luxury suited her. That same morning, His Highness the Crown Prince asked Olivia for a personal meeting. She was going to pass out for a while, but her sister didn't believe that the lady was really going to go to the meeting in that awful dress. It seems like she could have worn a different dress, but everything suited her, even dark, bright, and light tones. There was nothing that could be done now, and there was absolutely no time to choose a custom-made dress. His master became confused. Did she really think this dress was beautiful? Because, frankly speaking, she was not one of those who suit bright clothes. Olivia was wearing a beautiful dress the color of forest moss and pine needles. Olivia asked if it didn't suit her. The younger sister was sure that the dress was simply wonderful. She would be happy to wear it, and as soon as possible. Olivia's long, snow-white hair looked incredibly beautiful in these bright clothes, and she looked like a true aristocrat. When the little girl saw off her older sister, she was so happy, as if she herself was leaving as a master. The first meeting was supposed to take place inside the palace, and Olivia really hoped that the Crown Prince would definitely like her appearance. Olivia was greeted by a respectable young man in a light tuxedo, his snow-colored hair neatly combed back. His movements were smooth, like the flow of a river, and every word, spoken in a low, velvety voice, sounded weighty and significant. The lady felt a little overwhelmed, but at the same time incredibly excited. This evening promised to be unforgettable, full of secrets and unexpected discoveries. The lady greeted the little son of the empire, and gently lowering her eyes was a little worried. As soon as the young man saw the girl, he realized that this was the same Olivia Madeline that he already knew about. The court faction pushed the half-blood heroine Madeline as a bride for the crown prince, while no one understood how they dared to transform someone by foisting this plebeian on him. After the girl was also a half-breed from the Madeline family, the young man was warned that at least today he needed to spend time with the Duchess. This means that because the girl was simply a half-breed, she could never become His Majesty's bride. The young man looked closely at Lady Olivia and saw in her not simplicity, but something more. The slight blush on her cheeks betrayed her excitement, like the petals of a tea rose touched by the first frost. The young man wondered if the lady was always so diligent, and yes, his opinion was correct, because each time the girl was made into a lower-class person. Therefore, in the company of aristocrats and high-ranking people, she behaved very modestly, and all she wanted was to see His Highness as soon as possible, to understand why he had decided to invite her here. The guy laughed and said that Olivia was an incredibly naive girl, but this joke was not very pleasant for her. The maids were busy at the table, and after these words, the heroine felt even more offended. She didn't understand whether this was really a stupid joke, but even if it was, he still hinted at her dirty blood. From the gentleman's satisfied face, it was not clear that he felt any hostility towards her. Suddenly, the gentleman turned to Burton, declaring that they had forgotten the most important thing, to bring the exotic fig jam. Olivia had never tried anything like this before, and didn't understand why there was fig jam there, since they just wanted to talk. The young man insisted that fig jam was the girl's favorite jam, which is why it had to be on the table. She treated it with indifference, and she had never even tried it in her life, especially since it was not her favorite dish. In fact, his lover Maria adores everything made from figs, and even eats them in all her buns. It is completely unclear what the gentleman is trying to achieve by starting his conversation with stupid fig jam, which was not on the table. He invited her here for a reason, and every second he looked into the girl's eyes with a cold gaze. I lived to see her true behavior. Olivia felt so uncomfortable that she wanted to run away from there as quickly as possible and never come back again. He definitely did it out of spite, and how he wants the girl to react to this, even though he was always late and caring. 11 years ago, Leopold's birthday banquet was going just fine, but a terrible tragedy happened. The Duchess died, and her eyes were green. Suddenly, Olivia became very scared. She wanted to run away as far as possible, and could not even utter a word. She remembered herself when she was still a very little girl, and hoped that one day her life would become happy. The young gentleman with whom she had been friends as a child admired her charming name, Olivia. She could not help but fall in love with him at first sight, with her future groom, who had been her only savior all her life. So she couldn't say anything else except how incredibly she adored figs and everything connected with them, the young man thought, and it seemed that it was definitely someone else, and every second he tried to check the girl sitting opposite him. Olivia felt pressured and had a hard time opening up, not knowing what to say. He admitted that his future bride looked tired and that he should probably go and rest, and in the end, this is what Leopold meant. Finally, the heroine managed to breathe a sigh of relief, and she admitted that, as always, His Majesty was incredibly caring towards other people. She thanked him for his time, and I was sure that in fact the man did not want this at all. Of course, the care in the form of fig jam turned out to be completely beyond her, so this is all that was left for her pride. However, the lady warned that the gentleman might not send her flowers anymore, and there was no need for that. As soon as he heard about the flowers, the slightest smirk appeared on his face, and a spark of anger flashed in his eyes. He wanted to know if the lady was now showing her unpleasant character in this way. And if she wants to get something, she needs to learn to wait like a real noble lady, sitting quietly and silently. He was almost about to leave, but suddenly stopped in front of the girl and decided to say something last. This hair color, as well as her new olive dress, does not suit her at all and makes her look even more disgusting. After an unpleasant, tense conversation, Olivia tried to come to her senses, but she regretted that she was destined to be here. In fact, it was not he who sent all the gifts, but the last numerous gifts that filled the entire room, notes that made the heart flutter. It was all just a lie that had no noble or respectful attitude towards Olivia. She tried to control herself and not to cry like the fool Madeline, because at such moments she should be an indifferent lady. But whoever once dared to challenge Madame Madeleine will forever remember his indecent act. To begin with, she decided to return to the palace and find out all the details to get more information about this man. She told her little sister to come at 4, which meant she would show up later, and she also told the coachman to come later, which meant there would definitely be no one there for a while. Now she was thinking what to do until she accidentally saw the Duke, who unexpectedly appeared next to her. The young man had an incredibly ecstatic look, as if he had seen the truest happiness in his life, but only the lady stood before him. The meeting turned out to be incredibly unexpected, but Olivia immediately remembered this guy the first time they saw him. This happened every time in a similar situation, and the Duke always appeared nearby. A strange guy who made her feel special, his carefree smile. For some reason, tender feelings fluttered in the heroine's soul. One day the gentleman confessed that if he met his beloved, he would give her all the jewels in the world, and these words were enough. The lady asked if he had really decided to shower her with gifts, even though they had only known each other for a short time. Nothing will happen if she asks a simple question whether the gentleman has changed his mind yet. The young man did not have even a drop of doubt, and he immediately confirmed his words, and of course he was going to fulfill his will. So the heroine asked a guy she barely knew to give her a ride in a carriage, and that wasn't like her at all. Still, when she was around him, Olivia felt safe. I couldn't find the answer to that question. Before they had time to talk about it, the gentleman had already presented his first gift and proudly handed it to the girl. Olivia had never imagined that it would happen so soon, but now there was a beautiful decorated snow-white box lying in front of her. Opening it, she saw wonderful snow-white leather gloves, decorated with an exquisite emerald and expensive lace. It was definitely a design that you wouldn't see anywhere else, and how could you not believe it now, since the Duke had everything that was most expensive? Olivia had never received gifts before, and she didn't even know how to accept them properly, or whether it was even possible to do so. For some time she did not touch the gift, as if she was afraid to even slightly touch such luxury. The Duke chose the gift himself. Did he really know from just one glance that these gloves would be perfect? Olivia put on one snow-white glove, which seemed to become her second skin, and the size really did fit perfectly. All this time, while she was trying on her gift, the gentleman looked at her and smiled affably, and it seemed that this brought him some happiness. The sun illuminated the imperial residence, and the fountains, decorated with statues of mythical creatures, playfully shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow, creating a cool and refreshing atmosphere on a hot day. The heroes exited the carriage holding hands. It was their first touch, and Olivia felt it with trepidation. She suddenly wondered if she had ever asked this gentleman's name, or if she had even been deigning to learn his name all this time. The respectable gentleman in the cloak carefully held the girl's hand and looked at her as if he had known her all his life. Looking into each other's eyes, the girl carefully said her name, Olivia Madeleine, and it was unlikely that the gentleman was not familiar with it. The young man admitted that this was the most beautiful name he had ever heard in his life. It was strange. He didn't even pay attention to the last name, about which terrible, unpleasant rumors were circulating. He definitely knew this family. She was part of their family, but it turned out that the gentleman didn't care at all about her past. The girl was very interested in the name of the young man who treated her so kindly, and even gave her a simply luxurious gift. As soon as she asked about his name, he only admitted that he was very sorry, and he could not say it now. He hoped that Olivia might misunderstand, she might get scared, and their communication would end there instantly. Therefore, the young man only warned that right now he urgently needed to go on important business, but did not answer her question. The lady did not understand what serious mystery could be hidden in it, and why the young gentleman could not tell his name. And why was she so sure that he would wait for her all this time, when everyone was a stranger to him? The young man smiled a noble smile, and he looked at the girl with incredible tenderness, which she had never received from anyone before. He said goodbye to her thoughtfully, touching the fingers of the glove he had given her, and promised to definitely see her next time. The gentleman also promised to introduce himself to her descriptively, but only with the most precious gift. Olivia couldn't understand whether there was something she couldn't find on her own, and this mystery thrilled her soul. For example, a one-of-a-kind sword inlaid with precious stones, and a lady will definitely never be able to find such a thing anywhere. There was the lady saw in him not a hero from a fairy tale, but a man who could perhaps become her support and encouragement in this complex and unpredictable world. Today the Duchess went to the palace, and the butler was perplexed as to why the girl had appeared here so unexpectedly. He was sure that she had just recently seen His Majesty and decided to politely inquire about the reason for the girl's arrival here. Olivia admitted that she had come here on her way to see His Majesty and simply wanted to check something. The lady was not going to tell all the details, nor any parts of her already thought-out plan. If His Majesty did not come to the meeting on Wednesday, then she asked if it was known that he had sent flowers with gifts. The butler was sure that His Majesty was completely unaware of everything that was happening, and for him this was surprising news. Olivia menacingly asked if the chief servant was really going to humiliate her now and not tell her the whole truth. The Duchess was already at dinner, and the butler was merely carrying out orders, and the lady asked if this was so, whether he himself was sending the notes. Hearing about the strange letters, the butler's eyes widened even more, as if he really didn't understand what they were talking about. Olivia wanted to find out the whole truth and ask about the nicest letters that continued to arrive at her house. Suddenly, the girl laughed loudly, as if she finally understood the whole truth and the main lie. The butler didn't even know that among the gifts, His Majesty also had a note with his name on it, and he tried to prove it to the lady. While the heroes were talking in the living room, a young lady stood outside the door, eavesdropping on their words the whole time. Gifts never had much value for Olivia. What mattered most was the message. It doesn't matter whether it's a gift or flowers. Nothing matters. The most important thing is that at one moment it really comforted her. Olivia heard that the youngest son had recently been promoted to assistant to the eldest servant at the court of Tiaz, and this certainly did not happen by chance. The scent of jasmine and roses wafting from the manicured gardens fills the air with intoxicating languor in the luxurious court of the Tiaze. The palace that has been ruled by all the crown prince's previous brides, the palace that is used when the bride becomes a wife. Olivia had recently also received her own room there. She had not yet become an official wife, and she had no right to give orders. If we are talking about the Tiaz Palace, then this changes everything radically, and the lady wanted to know what would happen if the servants exceeded their authority. The situation was such that someone had deliberately written a note and dared to insult Madeline, who had no intention of sitting idly by. The butler was lucky. He always treated her well, otherwise he definitely wouldn't have gotten away with it. It was noticeable that when talking about his youngest son, he hesitated and was nervous, which definitely spoke about his internal state. Are all fathers like this? Are their children really that dear to them, and are they ready to do absolutely anything for their little ones? Her father was a completely different person. He hated his daughter with all his soul. He only prayed for her to disappear from his life forever. He never said any kind or pleasant words, but only called me a worthless girl who was not capable of anything when she grew up. Today was a special day when Duke Madeleine personally arrived to visit with the Empress. He greeted Her Majesty with an unexpected meeting, probably wanting to talk about something. The Empress politely asked the young man to sit down, and she understood perfectly well why the gentleman had come to her so soon. The Duke heard that the Empress had an important conversation with him, and the noble lady immediately decided to get down to business. Surely these were shameful rumors, and the Duke heard them, but now Olivia is said to spend every meeting with His Majesty completely alone. For a high-ranking lady, this was not a very serious problem, but still, someone decided to stand in her way. She said that in order to console the poor little girl, she ordered that gifts be sent to her, and the maid dared to add a note, and apparently this upset her too much. The butler never told the truth to Olivia, who came to find out why someone dared to write such a letter. The Empress made it clear to the Duke that she did not want to be unable to see Olivia because of this. In case of an unpleasant incident, his other daughter, a lady named Essela, will come to meet him. The lady asked the Duke to think carefully before doing anything, as his decision depended on too much. It doesn't matter what others say behind their backs, in other mansions, but here she suggested being together. The Duke was well aware that the Empress's words were so important, and he simply had no right not to listen to her. And every time some slander reached the Empress, her aristocratic assistants tried to calm the enraged lady. The Duke wanted to follow his plan, which the Empress was now interfering with and standing in his way. All this time, Olivia thought for a long time, and finally came to the conclusion that this was definitely the work of Countess Chase. Information has reached her that Her Majesty has recently ordered the expulsion of Countess Chase, and she no longer works here. Countess Chase is one of the Empress's people. She is again sacrificing a small fry to save her own skin. She insulted not only Olivia, but all the Madeleines, so she deserves it. But who knows, maybe her father is also angry with her. All this time the maid could not find a place for herself. It was already late at night, and she could not wait for her mistress to return. And finally, when the doors of the mansion opened, the young lady ran up to Olivia and asked why she had only come now. The maid was incredibly excited, but there was one interesting reason his lordship had been looking for Olivia for a long time. During the 14 years she spent at Madeleine, Olivia was never allowed to enter her father's office. Something must have happened this evening, and after so much time the father wanted to see his unloved daughter. Standing in front of his door, the girl felt a strong sense of excitement, but she shouldn't panic. Perhaps he found out about what happened in the palace and just wanted to stand up for her. The lady opened the office and stopped in front of her father, whose gaze could pierce even a block of ice. Olivia was silent because this was the first time she had found herself with her father in his office, and she had no idea what he wanted. At that moment, she tried to pull herself together and become a true crown princess, proud and warlike. Father began his speech and asked for only one thing, and Olivia couldn't even do that properly. And at that moment the girl realized that she would again be scolded for actions that she did not do, or to which she had nothing to do. Father heard that the Empress sent her daughter a gift as a consolation, and she threatened the chief of the guard because of a suspicious note, and this is simply ridiculous. He didn't see the future of the crown princess in this behavior until Olivia tried to prove that it was not just a note, and someone, posing as the crown prince, mocked her and insulted Madeleine's family. The father asked what the big deal was and why it was offensive to Madeleine's family, clearly implying that Olivia had nothing to do with the family. Father asked again why Olivia considered this a mockery of the family, when it was a mockery exclusively of her. She, barely holding back tears, admitted that she was also Madeleine's family and would like to receive at least some support from her father. She was not afraid to express her opinion, but the gentleman's menacing, frowning gaze continued to drill a hole in her. All this time she thought that her father ignored her because she did not make enough effort to become a full-fledged part of the family. Despite all his neglect, he took her here when she was left completely alone, gave her beautiful silk dresses and bought her delicious food. And he even seated her next to Leopold, in the most honorable place, to show that this girl was part of the family. There was something else important here. He created a new family for her, loving and beautiful, but in an instant everything was shattered into pieces. The gentleman warned that if he wanted to force her to call him Madeleine, she should behave with dignity, like a great aristocrat of a noble family. The lady's behavior upsets him more than it pleases him, which is why he decided to talk to her personally. He asked her to control herself and get rid of the dirty rumors that had stuck, and not to talk to her younger sister without his permission. Don't take your misfortunes out on her, and never involve her in Madeleine's affairs again. Olivia stated threateningly that she had done nothing, but for some reason there were dirty rumors about her, and just today she had done something in the palace. The lady insisted that she did what happened at the Thiaz palace, which is under her care, to protect Madeleine. The father did not believe this girl and asked her to leave the office, not wanting to hear anything more from her. Olivia believed deep down that they would be able to find contact with their father years later. Unfortunately, the miracle never happened. She still felt unwanted in this huge family where she had once been happy and loved. High on the wall hung a family portrait depicting the mother, children, and a happy family. With tears in her eyes, she watched as her mother caringly held her little sister, her sincere eyes expressing great love. After her death, everything changed dramatically. Olivia no longer felt that she had any relatives in her family. Every corner of this house was a reminder of pain and disappointment, but once this place had been the happiest place in the world for her. Soon she was left completely alone in this vast world, without support, love, and care. Her heart fiercely desired to be loved and happy. This was the only meaning of her life. Suddenly she remembered the young gentleman who was really hoping for another opportunity to meet her. And even when he called her name, the most beautiful in the world, something stirred inside her. How funny, Olivia Madeleine, comforting herself with thoughts of a stranger, because in reality she has no one else to trust. She expected at least a little gratitude from her father, even if it was for a good job or a good job, but she also hoped to at least hear that it was not her fault at all. The following evening, a grand banquet in honor of the victory was held in the imperial palace, where the most honorable citizens of the empire gathered. The dress was chosen to match the crown prince's attire, as if they were partners, but for some reason one of the aristocrats was completely alone at this event. The aristocrats whispered that the lady wanted to show everyone that she had stolen her beloved crown prince from her, and perhaps she is waiting for someone to pity her green eyes, which is why she stands aside, completely alone. The lady did not pay attention to the stupid rumors that were whispered. It would have been better if she had simply given up this dress to Estelle. Slowly clenching her hand into a fist, Olivia tried to convince herself that everything was perfectly fine, and this happened to her quite often. At last, the great sun and moon of the French Empire, their Majesties the Emperor and Empress, appeared before the guests. The aristocrats bowed tirelessly to the venerable gentleman and also greeted his unimaginably luxurious lady, the Empress. Behind her parents, with a sweet expression on her face and dressed in the most luxurious outfit, walked the beautiful princess who would one day take her mother's place. Everyone knelt before the son of the Elona Empire, greeting their majesties the Emperor and Empress. When silence reigned in the hall, the Emperor declared that the long battle had finally ended, and he did not know when such a happy day would come again. This day was the most joyful in the world. Today, the main heroes of the day were nowhere to be seen for some reason. They still hadn't arrived at the beginning of the celebration. The butler whispered to the Emperor that the main guests had indeed not yet appeared at the event. The Emperor was confused as to what was going on here. The celebration had been specially organized, but His Serene Highness Archduke Lowell Vikander was nowhere to be seen. The next second, the Imperial Knightly Guard, the Venerable Knights of the Vicator, appeared at the event. The knights, dressed in formal attire, marched with precision, measuring every step towards the Emperor. Carefully examining the knights, the heroine assumed that her younger brother Jane must be there. She believed that the boy must definitely return from the battlefield if she was impatiently awaiting his appearance. The first to bow before the Emperor was the chief commander, who had been leading the entire army all this time. The young man's name was Edwin Lowell Vikander, and he greeted His Majesty the Emperor with pride. Olivia was completely stunned when she saw this young man, because in this novel she had already met him more than once. She couldn't breathe from what she saw, and this man was the one she had been thinking about every minute for the last few days. The Emperor praised the glorious knights who had finally arrived and asked why they had arrived so late to the grand feast he had prepared. Edwin asked for forgiveness, since an ordinary sword cannot be used for the oath that His Majesty takes. He presented the Vikander relic to the Emperor, and the precious sword Erotin was now in the power of the Empire. It was that very sword, the treasure of the dynasty that fell 30 years ago. They say the Emperor had long wanted to get it, and Vikander would rather give up his beloved crystal mines than show this sword. The Emperor was worried that the first knight of the Empire did not honor any of the ladies, but here he was still ready to take the great knightly oath. The Emperor was glad that the Archduke was finding a worthy lady today, and today he vowed to fulfill one of his wishes. Now he was going to keep the Vikander on a short leash and ask the Archduke to swear an oath to the magnificent princess. The princess was sure that the master should swear an oath to her, and she enthusiastically approached to accept the precious sword. The Archduke smiled so sweetly, turned in the other direction, and went somewhere. He begged on one knee in front of another lady in a luxurious red dress named Lady Olivia Madeline. The young man admitted that it was an honor for him to pronounce this name, and the sword, which combines precious stones that are unique in its world. Edwin Lowell Vikander, as a knight, with all confidence in front of all the aristocrats, decided to dedicate this precious sword to another lady. Olivia was simply in shock, and she didn't even suspect that the sword would be handed to her. The gentleman warned that in order to win the lady's favor, he must offer something truly precious, something that would make everyone envious, and it turned out to be a sword that combined the most precious stones. He handed the girl's sword and asked if he would allow her to become her sword, so that she could also defend it bravely, and this is important. A polite tone, as if he expected her to accept his choice unconditionally. But who was she to this noble man? The Emperor stated that, unfortunately, the Duke would have to take back his vow, and this was the main condition of the deal. At that moment, another gentleman approached the girl, calling her his fiancée, and asked if it would not be a scandal if an unmarried archduke made a vow to his fiancée. This is a vow approved by His Majesty the Emperor. What could be scandalous if it were given to Lady Madeline, and not go against the will of His Highness? After the vows were made, the first dance would have to be danced, and the gentleman found this impolite to the lady accompanying him. The Duke had already prepared for such answers and had planned all the questions in advance. Since His Majesty the Crown Prince was not alone, he decided that the lady had come alone specifically for his sake, and apparently this was his mistake. Anyone who sees it will think that he asked the lady not for an oath, but for her hand and heart. A real scandal was brewing in the hall, because Olivia's fiancé was starting to get incredibly angry at the Duke's RC. The princess asked the young man to calm down, and he should not have pointed out the girl's unsuitable attire. The aristocrats laughed. Did not a lady know what rules of etiquette she should adhere to when accepting an oath from a young gentleman? The first mention of the knight's oath in historical chronicles was during the time of Liam the French, and this story has been around for many centuries. So now Olivia stood before the Grand Duke while her restless fiancé tried to fix something. The first emperor of the empire, and Empress Olika Franz, during the times of chaos in the empire, something was said in the chronicles. The white dress of the empress, who had been praying for the safe return of the emperor, was completely soaked in blood due to the last battle. Then a terrible event happened. The wedding was cancelled, but the girl seemed to be happy about it. And to her, the empress, keeping only her snow-white gloves in a dress red with blood, presented the emperor with flowers brought to the altar. According to the etiquette of old books, nothing better could be found than the current outfit of Mrs. Olivia. Today, at an imperial event, she appeared in a luxurious red dress with snow-white gloves on her exquisite hands. The Duke thanked the Crown Prince and the Princess, and thanks to the advice of such esteemed persons, he was able to take an impeccable oath. The aristocrats were outraged there should be flowers, which are an important part of the vow, and Olivia did not dare offer fleeting flowers to the symbol of purity. And instead she offered this precious stone as an expression of her strong feelings, presenting it to the noble gentleman. Olivia Madeline has just presented the most precious ingot to the master at the imperial feast. The Duke gladly accepted the honor that Olivia had done for him, and from that moment their story was only just beginning. Perhaps in the future this couple will face terrible and unpleasant things, because the emperor was sure that the Duke's wife would have his daughter. As the young man rose from his knees, his legs wobbled with joy, and he did not notice how he lightly touched the noble lady. The gentleman asked for forgiveness. He had been kneeling for so long and his legs had simply gone numb, and Olivia had heard that he was an excellent knight, but it seemed his legs were weaker. Edwin once again inquired whether the noble lady would be willing to share her first dance with him at this wonderful event. Is it really possible for a person whose legs just went numb to dance right away? He warned me at Hayes, he is completely fine. He warned in advance that he didn't know how to dance at all, but he really enjoyed this activity. The gentleman was perfectly connected with the whole body, so perhaps he could at least help the girl with something this time. Now it was as if no one else existed around Olivia, and at that moment she felt at least a little bit happy. But still, someone did not give her peace, and the future groom approached the beautiful couple. He declared that his bride had received the oath of allegiance from the best knight in the empire, right in front of all the aristocrats. The young man glared at the girl, only wanting to know what her first feelings were about her first oath. Indeed, Olivia received her first vow for the first time in her life. This could have brought her a lot of problems, but now she did not think about it. She saw that grimace again when something was not to her liking, a photograph in which Leopold was visible. Everyone must find their own support in this life. Every person needs someone with whom they will feel like one whole. Never had the lady felt someone so close as Edwin, whom she had only recently met. The girl happily gave him her hand, while he carefully touched her fingers and looked into her eyes with special tenderness. They held hands and looked at each other sweetly, right in front of the impudent young man, who was sure that Olivia was destined to be his. He couldn't believe how the girl dared to contradict him, because no one had ever said a word against him. Constantly monitoring the ongoing situations, Olivia tried to always be there and support this man. And now she just wanted to avoid his gaze forever, so as to never experience unpleasant sensations again. Yes, she continued to contradict, and was ready to tell him no, but now she was holding hands tightly with another person. Edwin turned to His Majesty, asking him to step aside, because right now he was going to dance his first dance with the beautiful lady. The young man laughed loudly. She was his bride, and the first dance rightfully belonged only to him. He was sure that Olivia would not be able to refuse him, because in the future she could face big problems. He once again offered to dance the first dance with him as the legal future groom. Now Olivia finally has a choice: stay with the hateful man who makes her sick every day, or remember her mother's words. The nickname that no one ever called her after her mother left her life was special to her. Once upon a time, she really dreamed of dancing her first dance with the master, but a lot has changed since then. Each time this man seemed to give orders, he spoke with such confidence as if he were communicating with knights and not a gentle, fragile lady. The first dance, which did not take place even at her debut, left the young lady incredibly upset. He had a great opportunity to make things right and show this person who she really was. The banquet was dedicated to the heroes of the battles, and she was sure to give the first dance to the venerable Duke, despite all the orders of her hated fiancé. Smiling, the lady offered to dance a cheerful first dance with that young lady standing behind him. The gentleman was so furious and angry that he didn't know where to go. He had just been disgraced in front of all the aristocrats, as well as in front of the imperial family. It was the first time that fragile Olivia refused a man with whom she simply could not be near. She had no idea if everything would be okay in the future, but she had just really pushed the leopard away. Edwin noticed that the girl was still holding a heavy sword in her hands and, out of concern, offered to support it. In fact, it wasn't that heavy, but the heroine happily presented the gentleman with his wonderful, rare gift. Beautiful, magical music began to play, and the heroes, swirling in a magnificent waltz, were finally able to have a pleasant time together. For some reason, Olivia was even more nervous than before, and it was immediately noticeable on her face. And for her, there was nothing more exciting than the first dance, and she had never danced before in her life. The Duke whispered that it was his first time dancing too, and now they could say they were in the same boat. The lady asked him not to worry. She had trained a lot, so she promised not to step on his foot. Edwin didn't see anything terrible in this, and even if he pierced his foot with a heel, it would not be a terrible tragedy. If something happens, the girls will have to take responsibility, because it is their first time. Edwin, usually reserved and unperturbed, felt a slight tremor in his hands as he held her thin palm. Every step, every movement was filled with special significance. Edwin led her confidently but gently, allowing her to feel like a fragile porcelain figurine in his arms. In reality, everything turned out differently. The Duke danced skillfully and had excellent control of his body, but Olivia also trained for a very long time. Their eyes met only for a moment, but these meetings were enough to ignite the flame that had been smoldering in their hearts for a long time. And is this guy really not the same Duke Vikander who is said to be an incredible psychopath? Other couples swirled around them, but at that moment there were only the two of them, united by the dance and the magical atmosphere of the ball. Edwin admired her beauty, her grace, and realized that he had fallen madly in love with her, without a trace. Olivia, in turn, tried not to look him in the eyes, afraid to reveal her true feelings, which were raging in her soul like a spring storm. The aristocrats kept their eyes on the newlyweds during the dance, and the lady asked why the Duke had decided to give them such a precious sword. But she didn't pay any attention to the contemptuous glances of those around her, and now she was truly happy. Olivia knew that everyone would condemn her actions, condemn the actions of the Grand Duke, and this would only be a new reason for stupid gossip. The name of which always resounds within the walls of the palace, Olivia with green eyes and the Grand Duke who honored her with this title. After today's event, his name would be in their first gossip. Olivia didn't want to cause inconvenience to others, so she kept her distance from Acela. And then she smiled stupidly for a long time, and this could be interpreted as anyone present wanted. The beautiful dance between the Duke and Olivia continued as if they were specially made to dance with each other. In fact, Olivia tried to calm herself down. It didn't matter what he said next, and it was important for her to just not show it. But the Duke remembered that he was going to give the sword, the most precious gift, and what can you do? The very moment had come. The Duke said that the most precious gift in the world should be for his only beloved mistress, who would bathe in luxury all her life. Sincerity sparkled in his scarlet eyes. The heroine was very afraid to believe this man, but her feelings said otherwise. When the music stopped, they pulled away from each other, but their hands continued to touch. Edwin spoke pleasant words, and Olivia did not understand how he could say such things without any embarrassment in front of anyone. When the dance ended, Olivia's husband approached the heroes and asked how much they enjoyed their time together. Olivia was no longer that naive girl, and declared menacingly that she had had a wonderful time with the Duke. And her impudent husband has probably already had fun with another lady, completely forgetting about his own common sense. The assistant brought the precious sword Ararutan to the Duke, but for some reason the young man was extremely sad. He wasn't interested in the jewel at all right now. He wanted to know why the waltz had a set time. The waltz was strictly limited because it was necessary to change partners during the dance, but this was not the main thing, and Edwin had to swear an oath before Her Highness. Recently he said that he would bend over backwards again for the sake of the precious mine, but the Duke kept repeating the same thing about the waltz and why it was necessary to change partners. Standing with the precious relic, his assistant saw the gentleman like this for the first time and only remained perplexedly silent. He didn't understand what the gentleman was looking at, since it was now a matter of an expensive mine. And did the plans of many people who came to this event really come crashing down because of one girl with snow-white hair? It seems the operation to seduce the princess for the crystal mine has been successfully thwarted, but the master would not have started all this without a specific plan. Unfortunately, the lady was forced to dance with her future husband, and all this time she stood with him with incredibly sad eyes. She could smell the intoxicating smell of cigars coming from him, which was unpleasant every time. Unexpectedly, the young man asked Olivia to thank Lady Maria. He was truly incredibly angry, and if Maria hadn't tried to cheer him up, something terrible might have happened. Olivia knew it. He was talking about some other girl again, even though his future wife was standing next to him. The cheerful music started playing again, and this meant that the couples had to start a joyful dance, enjoying the luxurious event. The lady touched the gentleman's shoulder with hostility. His pace seemed too fast, and the young man angrily declared that if the girl couldn't dance, she should at least pretend that she could dance, and Olivia realized at that moment that this was her last dance with this man. It was Olivia's first dance with Leopold, which she had dreamed of, but she had not imagined it this way. She definitely dreamed of being in the back of a luxurious banquet hall under everyone's gaze, tenderly and with respect and care. Looking into Leopold's eyes, she wanted to run away from him somewhere far away and never meet him again in her life. Despite the unpleasant feelings raging in her soul, she had to play the role of his bride in front of all the aristocrats. He acted completely differently with her. He was cold and rude, and Olivia was even afraid to breathe next to him or say anything. Leopold was only like this with her. With the other girl, they laughed merrily, and there was not a drop of tension between them. Olivia watched them interact intently, and it was completely different from the way they treated her. After dancing with Leopold, the heroine decided to sit somewhere far away, so as not to even catch a glimpse of this hated man. One of the girls passed by and congratulated Olivia on her first dance, admiring the beautiful couple. The same girl, Maria, Lady Ethel, with whom Leopold danced his first dance, approached her. Olivia was very pleased. The lady congratulated her on her first dance, and it was very kind of her. And of course, Olivia was the bride of His Highness the Crown Prince. Maria wondered if she should not show the greatest attention to the venerable lady, who would soon become her legal wife. Suddenly, Olivia sneezed, not because she was sick, but because of the terrible tobacco smoke coming from Maria. Maria apologized, saying that she had gone out onto the terrace for a short while, and that was probably why she smelled a little of cigarette smoke. And why did she have to mention the terrace, which was famous as a place for secret meetings between lovers? Maria admitted that his fiancé probably knows that His Highness is always faithful only to certain cigars, but judging by her cough, the girl has a weak throat. In fact, she rarely has to smell tobacco smoke, which Olivia has hated since early childhood. Lady Maria had a beautiful white face, sparkling, sincere blue eyes, and luxurious golden silky hair. It was all so tender and magical, as if she had always been loved, and she had never seen sadness, sorrow, or disappointment in her life. She was like a sweet little cloud, and nothing compared to Olivia, who sometimes looked like the grayest cloud. His Highness the Crown Prince does not usually smoke cigars in her presence, and Maria must have strong bronchial tubes since she does not react to tobacco smoke. Suddenly, Olivia asked if Lady Maria would like to become Leopold's favorite, as the couple was incredibly well suited to each other. Polygamy had never been recognized in this country, and the proposal itself sounded absurd. So, ultimately, the highest place she can occupy is that of Countess von Lowaltz. A young lady has 2 ways to become the favorite of an influential man: to live like a lady, as she does now, or to find a suitable match and marry successfully, and then play the role of an unofficial favorite, but enjoy all the luxury and great benefits that a titled, respectable husband can give her. About 30 years had passed since the death of Countess Lowaltz, and Olivia declared that it seemed that a very suitable warm place had formed. Milady was indignant at how the mistress could say such things directly to her face, since she supposedly knew absolutely nothing about her. Olivia replied that if the girl was striving to take the place of the favorite, then why was she constantly demonstrating her closeness to His Highness and his official bride? Maria certainly didn't expect Olivia to be so rude to her, and she really tried to get as close to her as possible. After an unpleasant conversation, Maria hastened to leave, as she considered the lady to be incredibly rude, although in fact Olivia was simply telling the truth to her face. Olivia was finally left all alone again, and they say the first and second dances were absolutely delightful. The aristocrats were discussing it. It was Olivia's first ball, and she danced so magnificently, as if she had been born with this talent. Many people were wondering where Lady Ethel, who had just been nearby and talking to many people, had disappeared to so suddenly. The ladies couldn't stop asking why His Highness the Prince didn't show up, even in such a situation. But Olivia decided to take her leave for today, because so much had already happened. She silently left the aristocrats and walked to the far end of the corridor, no longer wanting to listen to stupid gossip. She remembered her sweet little sister who had lent her a beautiful golden brooch and wanted to find out about the event her sister was supposed to have fun at. By the way, Olivia needed to pick up her hair clip, but the gentleman she was dancing with seemed to have left and was nowhere to be seen. Luckily, the victory feast lasts a whole week, so Olivia will still have the opportunity to meet this man. Without returning to the palace for the lavish ball, Olivia boarded her carriage and drove slowly back to her home to digest the information. She hadn't seen Jade for a long time and wanted to talk to him, and she was very curious about where he was. As soon as she entered the palace living room, she saw the silhouette of a man on the second floor, and it was definitely Mr. Jade. Olivia was incredibly happy about his return. She had been waiting for him for a long time and wanted to talk to her as soon as possible. Instead of a friendly greeting, she was met by an angry young man who immediately asked what this psycho was to his sister. Olivia didn't understand what was being discussed, but they say that at the reception, the Duke swore an oath to her, and he asked the girl to explain where this nonsense came from. They hadn't seen each other for a year and a half, and Olivia couldn't even imagine that his first words would be anger and rage. He wasn't wounded in the war, didn't answer letters, and then returned the humanitarian aid. Olivia stood silently, waiting for the next words, and this was not at all how she had imagined meeting the person she missed. And the young man confessed that he knew exactly who would swear an oath to his stupid little sister, especially like this Archduke. With nothing to hide from her fake family, Olivia confidently revealed that this was exactly how things were at the festive event. Jade didn't even immediately believe her words, and was still sure that these were just impudent and stupid rumors. She said that his lordship had indeed taken an oath to her. Even Kondrat had seen it, and he could be asked when he would return. Jade started screaming loudly, calling her sister the stupidest girl in the world because she didn't even have a clue what it all meant. He was so angry, as if this was the only thing he didn't want in his life. Olivia was already a grown-up girl. She had her first debut, and she had no intention of reporting to her annoying brothers. She could also receive oaths from honorable noble lords, but for some reason it was this man who became the center of discord. She asked Jade why he spoke as if no one would ever swear an oath to her, since she was such a lovely, sweet lady. She touched the railing with her gloved hand, and the young man immediately noticed that these were those very special Caperti gloves. And as soon as he realized that she had received them as a gift from the Archduke, an even more terrifying grimace appeared on his face. Jade wanted to know if they knew each other before meeting today, and whether his sister was probably just lying to him. Rage filled his soul, darkness filled his mind, and he shouted that Olivia was the stupidest girl in the world. At this point, their unpleasant conversation ended, and Olivia, who had been eagerly awaiting her brother, was again left disappointed. Even despite his behavior, she always treated him with care and special concern, but today something terrible happened, and she did not expect him to behave like this. Once upon a time, there lived an amethyst princess and an emerald princess. Both princesses had a very handsome brother, but after a terrible tragedy, the boy considered Olivia an evil enemy, and his mother died because of her. Olivia often came to look at the family portrait to soothe her soul with pleasant and warm memories of when her mother was still alive. Young Jade looked the kindest of them all in the photograph, but now he could be welcomed into the harsh reality. There was a bouquet of beautiful snow-white flowers lying on the marble floor, and the lady to whom it belonged was incredibly angry. She trampled the beautiful flowers furiously with her pearl-colored slipper, as if she thought that this might calm her anger a little. The heroine's name was Reina Franz. She was an honorary princess of the Frankish Empire, and she was definitely not the good hero of the novel. Recently, an incident occurred, and Edwin Vikander somehow dared to deceive her, and after that, the lady became incredibly angry with him. The honorable lady asked the angry Princess Reina to behave with dignity, because even when an aristocrat is angry, she should not show it. Next to her at the table sat the Empress of the Frankish Empire, her silk clothes embroidered with gold and precious stones emphasizing her grandeur and inaccessibility. Reina could not calm down. Even despite her mother's words, she continued to shout loudly in anger throughout the palace. The reason for her anger was one milady, a girl named Olivia Madeline, whom she hated from the very first sight. The princess was beside herself with anger. Olivia dared to dance the first dance with the Duke as the main character, and with her brother too, but this place should have belonged to her. The Empress tried to calm her daughter down, saying that the princess had the noblest blood and a sharp mind, and no one else could compete with her. She assured that Reina would definitely be able to keep Olivia Madeline in her hands in the future and show that she was the main thing here. The Empress wanted the princess to curb her insolence, and she had complete confidence in her daughter's talent. The ladies were planning to demand the impossible again, or to ask for something that was impossible for an ordinary person to obtain. Ready Madeline asked the princess for tasks to prove that she was worthy of being the great crown princess. Reina has some idea. She's probably grabbed hold of Madeline's estate and is begging to be given some kind of work. A ferocious light flashed in the Empress's eyes, and her daughter's thoughts were completely in the right direction. And shouldn't Olivia do everything to atone for the late Duchess, whose death she is certainly to blame for? Unfortunately, only Madeline's legitimate daughter does not know the whole truth and constantly defends her sister. It seemed that a terrible plan had already been born in the princess's head to prevent Olivia from becoming a true noble aristocrat and receiving a title. Reina knew the family's worst secrets and was ready to tear Olivia apart like a fragile flower, and now she really felt sorry for her. The ladies decided to invite Lady Olivia to one of the most important events, and they really hoped that she would definitely not miss such an important event. A grand tea party was held for the aristocrats, and every girl was incredibly happy to be invited. Everyone praised the princess, admired her exquisite jewelry and appearance, but simply put, they tried to be on her side. The princess was happy, the ladies were having fun. Except for one person. They said she was in poor health and could not attend the tea party, but it seemed she was nervous because this was her first official tea party. Reina greeted all the noblewomen and thanked them for their presence, but the one she was aiming for was Lady Madeline. Having passed all the aristocrats, she immediately approached the girl with long blonde hair and greeted the lady. Olivia sat modestly in the farthest corner, and the princess came up and asked if the lady didn't like the magnificent tea party. Before preparing for tea, the maid supported her mistress in every possible way, promising that she would definitely protect her if the impudent aristocrat dared to pester her. She was completely serious, and Olivia might not have noticed, but the oath had created too many rumors. Today, all the back entrances and the front entrance of the mansion are filled with newspaper men, and even in jewelry stores, people were only discussing the previous one. As soon as the ladies got out of the carriage, no one bothered Olivia, and the militant maid walked forward, pushing aside all the passers-by with her hands. There was absolutely no one on the street, and Olivia thought so, but the maid was simply too worried about her mistress. She was so worried about fending off the journalists that she didn't even ask about the reason for their visit, as they stopped near a jewelry store. Olivia wanted the jewel back, and it would be better if it was exactly the same. The heroines went into the most famous jewelry store, and the lady asked to show her the best jewelry. The jewelry shop was known for its rare and unusual goods, but this time the occasion was special. The owner of the jewelry store was indignant. Was there really nothing that could catch her ladyship's eye? And surely the person in charge of purchasing should be punished. Olivia smiled and admitted that the store did indeed have a lot of rare items, but she was just being too picky this time. The girl's attention was drawn to a neat ring with a huge ruby in the middle, which shimmered and shimmered. It was the first time she had seen such a beautiful and exquisite decoration, and she immediately stopped near it. Carefully examining the precious piece, the girl realized, judging by the design, that it was definitely an engagement ring. The young man looked at the lady with a smile and asked how she managed to find out that it was an engagement ring. The salon manager approached the girl and asked who this noble, respectable gentleman was. Olivia said that it was her friend. She knew him. It seemed the tea had gotten cold, and she should probably make some fresh tea. The girl was confused and did not understand what to do now and how to improve the whole situation. The gentleman liked to constantly receive help, but this did not mean that he constantly needed to get into trouble. Indeed, his words sounded like nonsense, but Olivia did not understand how His Serene Highness the Archduke could wander around jewelry stores without security. After all, rumors might spread, and Olivia bowed warmly, apologized for being late, and greeted His Grace, the honorable gentleman. The young man decided to skip these greetings, but etiquette and its observance were incredibly important to Olivia. The gentleman would like to present to my lady, to whom he has sworn an oath, a privilege above etiquette, if it be convenient for the lady. It is unclear what the young man meant then, how he came to the conclusion that this was her ring, and moreover, it was intended exclusively for the engagement. The gentleman found out that this ring must belong to her, and had already thought of something long ago. He inherited it, and before showing the ring to the lady, he asked her to look after the jewel carefully. Now Olivia was completely confused and tried to figure everything out, but there was complete chaos in her head. She asked him to never joke like that again, otherwise someone might take the bait. Just yesterday, the emperor was ready to give him his daughter because this young man was the most eligible bachelor on the entire continent, a war hero and a wealthy duke, Edwin Vikander. But what if everyone is just hoping for this, saying so, and the young man has long had another plan in his head? He looked up mysteriously, hinting that he was indeed talking about Lady Olivia, and that he was no longer considering any other girls. Olivia couldn't believe that this joke turned out to be a reality, and the Duke himself was going to propose to her. Olivia was currently the Crown Prince's legal bride, but it seemed that this was not a problem for the Duke at all. On the contrary, he would gladly take this girl to himself so that she would never again know a terrible husband. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to overcome any difficulties to make his plan really work. As expected, the one called the Saint of the Frankish Empire is very protective of her eldest daughter, Madeline, and even the younger one, who has not yet made her debut. The aristocrats never ceased to admire the noble princess, calling her the most attentive girl in the world. Young Isella talked only about her older sister, who was now putting the estate's budget and territory in order. She heard that she even helped in the imperial palace. To prevent the older sister from overshadowing the princess, the lady modestly placed her hand on her shoulder so that she would finally stop chatting. The lady inquired about the details of yesterday's reception, which the princess had mentioned in the invitation. She even ran away from her father to hear this, because her sister never talks about his balls. The princess wondered if anyone was interested in the events of yesterday, and in fact, she would only be glad to tell them everything in detail. The ladies were eager, and some of them heard nothing more than the Duke's oath to Lady Madeline. The young lady is very close to the Crown Princess. She is her only sister, and now the princess is preparing to give her speech. The younger sister was a little scared, but she really wanted to listen to what the princess would say about her older sister. When the baby was little, the maids often made fun of the green eyes of the older half-blood sister and ordered her never to call her their relative. Suddenly, the princess announced that she felt unwell and decided to leave the tea party. In this, she was incredibly similar to her mother, who was always a little inclined and never got into stupid arguments. The princess turned to Isella, stating that in her place she would never call this girl sister, and she certainly wouldn't have considered the daughter of the dancer who was responsible for her mother's death a devoted member of her family. The young woman was confused, and the princess seemed to want to deliberately turn the girl against her older sister. The fact that she comes here is a secret of the whole family, and the princess was ready to tell this information only to her. Now the princess has revealed that this information has long been known to all the empires, and it is Olivia who is to blame for the death of her mother. She whispered in her ear that the princess's mother had died because of this girl with green eyes who had once appeared in the estate. The next day, Olivia came to Edwin and wanted to choose a gift for his lordship. The young man was surprised like a little boy when the girl offered to give him a pleasant surprise. The thing was that the brooch she gave yesterday actually belonged to her sister, and this meant that Olivia was forced to take this gift and present the gentleman with something more valuable. This is what she originally wanted to say, but she would like to give another gift instead. On the one hand, the young man was upset, but on the other hand, he had already received a pleasant surprise that he had not even suspected. It would have been better if Olivia had prepared everything properly from the start, but as the gentleman knows, the situation was not the most suitable. At the ball, everything happened too unexpectedly, and she didn't even imagine that fate would connect her with another person. Edwin didn't want to put the girl in an awkward position, so he acted honorably, as his heart told him. And instead he offered his hand to Olivia, who had no idea what he was about to offer her. A noble lady, whom the gentleman had called, appeared in the office, and she probably also knew something. Since Olivia had proven so perceptive and silent, he wanted to give her something, and the caring lady was about to prepare something. The lady fastened an incredible, delicate necklace around Olivia's neck, which seemed to be woven from dew and moonlight, shimmering on her neck like a precious web. In the center of the necklace there was a huge ruby. The necklace incredibly suited the young lady, but for some reason at that moment she felt a strong fear. She was afraid that bright colors did not suit her at all, but in fact the gentleman was so charmed, and the necklace suited her much better than he expected. After his words, Olivia felt calm and confident, and there were no longer echoes of her husband's terrible expressions in her thoughts. The gentleman admitted that the girl looks good in both dark and bright shades, and in all the color combinations that can be found on this vast planet. As he promised, the gentleman returned the brooch he had given him at the ball today, which belonged to his younger sister. The necklace alone was not enough in the carriage. There were many multicolored boxes that also contained jewelry. Olivia felt completely uncomfortable and decided that right now she had to confess something to the gentleman. If he is doing this because of a marriage proposal, then he does not have to try so hard for her. Yes, Edwin was too kind to her, showering her with compliments, tender looks, and caring gestures, polite tone and expensive gifts. Because of this, she was incredibly grateful to him. For him, these were ordinary little things, and in this case, he collected events even more kindly with a sweet, pleasant girl from whom something trembled inside him. Olivia couldn't understand why he chose her, an ordinary half-breed whom no one had ever paid attention to before. The whole point was that the gentleman wanted to be even kinder, but now, since they were not very familiar, he simply held back and tried not to burden her. So he smiled cheerfully and asked Olivia to accept his kindness because he only behaved this way towards her. It was hard for the girl to admit this. There were plenty of smart and educated aristocrats around, but for some reason he paid attention to her. Time passed incredibly quickly, and finally the carriage arrived at the appointed place. When the carriage stopped, the gentleman took the snow-white box in his hands and presented it to the girl, asking her to open it right away. Inside, on a velvet pillow, lay an incredible soft pink decoration with a huge ruby in the middle that was impossible to take your eyes off. He also prepared a gift for her sister and wanted to make a good impression on her beloved little sister. The gentleman looked incredibly polite, but deep down Olivia felt some kind of danger, because a common man could not express so much kindness without a reason. When the carriage arrived at the mansion, the butler took out all the boxes with gifts, and the Duke silently drove off to his residence. Holding one of the boxes in her hands, Olivia watched him go, and the most tender and touching smile appeared on her face. The little girl didn't even imagine that such expensive jewelry awaited her as a gift from the venerable gentleman. Holding the box in her hands, Olivia stopped near the mansion, and the maids did not even pay any attention to her. They never considered her their mistress, and every time they looked at her from head to toe with a contemptuous glance. Acela was probably already waiting for her older sister, and she wanted to go to her right now, but she suddenly tripped and fell right next to the gate of the mansion. She was sure that the baby must be in a great mood, and she was also looking forward to her arrival. Unfortunately, the situation in the mansion was much more dire, and Olivia did not expect that something like this could happen. Entering her sister's room, in the dark twilight she saw a disheveled Acela who seemed to be out of her mind. She was in tears, upset, distraught, and her eyes expressed unreal fear as soon as her sister entered the room. And the first thing she asked was whether it was really because of her older sister that the most terrible tragedy in her life happened. The information reached her that her mother had died because of her, and at that moment the box with the necklace fell out of Olivia's hands. She didn't expect to hear this from her younger sister. She blamed her for her mother's death, and a huge crack appeared on the beautiful, huge pendant of the necklace. The truth eluded me, veiled by the insidious whisper of envy. Lady Acella was beside herself, in tears, her shoulders shaking with sobs like the wind in an autumn forest. While Olivia desperately tried to tell the truth, the words stuck in her throat like clods of earth. She saw how mistrust and anger clouded Acella's clear gaze, how threads of bitterness and suspicion entangled her mind. Olivia knew that a lie planted in the fertile soil of grief would grow with inexorable force, poisoning everything around. The little sister screamed. The people were right. All green-eyed people were liars, and her older sister was no different from them, and it didn't matter at all. She screamed. Her mother suddenly disappeared because of her, and Olivia can no longer pretend to be worried because in reality she is just a dirty liar. The precious necklace lay on the floor, and Olivia couldn't understand how her little sister, with whom she had spent her entire life, could talk about her like that. Lady Acella remained deaf to her pleas, her face twisted in a grimace of pain and rage. In this chaos of emotions, Olivia realized that she would have to fight for innocence, but against whom would she fight? Against grief poisoned by the venom of lies, against her sister blinded by jealousy, or against fate itself, playing a cruel joke on her? The father burst into his daughter's bedroom and shouted where Acella was, and judging by his behavior, he was incredibly angry. Olivia understood that the biggest scandal was about to happen, and even her words would not help. The father was outraged the girl could not keep her promise that her younger sister should not know about this, and still infected her with her vile affliction. And he said the most terrible words, that if only he could, he would gladly erase Olivia from his life. Kondrat stood next to his father and looked angrily at his little sister, but first it was necessary to deal with Acella. The father immediately ordered a doctor to be called so that he could examine his daughter, who was lying on the bed in tears and sobs. Olivia was ready to run away from this house and never return, because in reality it was not her fault at all. Stopping next to the family portrait, she looked at the people she had once considered her family. Even in the family portrait, Olivia looked sad and disappointed, and did not look directly at the camera. Now she was no longer that girl. She wanted to find an inner core in herself to endure all the torments of her fatal fate. She knew one thing for sure: she no longer wanted to stay here, under the oppression and threats of her father and two eccentric brothers. She walked along the long palace garden completely alone, feeling only the cool breeze on her soft skin. The Duke was still there in the carriage and asked if the lady had come out specifically to meet him. He had a happy smile on his face and brought the gemstone pin as he had promised, but he immediately suspected something was wrong. Olivia greeted Edwin politely, but her quiet voice indicated that the girl felt absolutely terrible. Edwin noticed that something strange was happening to the lady's face, and there was a huge red scratch on her hand that was definitely not there recently. He immediately realized that something was definitely wrong as soon as she arrived at the mansion and talked to her relatives. Indeed, the situation was not very pleasant. Olivia did not want to go back and asked how far Edwin was willing to go for her. It would probably be easier to count on one hand what he couldn't do for her, so the lady decided to ask him for help. Olivia tried to force a smile onto her face, admitting that from that moment on, she had absolutely nowhere to go. A dark night fell over Madeline's mansion, where too many unpleasant conversations and events had taken place today. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep for a long time. She was tormented by terrible thoughts, and she couldn't cope with the pain that was tearing her soul apart. The pleasant memories of her and her little sister spending time carefree seemed to have turned into one huge, gloomy darkness. And now Olivia could not understand how to prove her truth, because now she had become a real outcast of the family and the most terrible enemy for her younger sister. Edwin was informed early in the morning. The lady went to the imperial palace as soon as the sun rose. Sitting on the windowsill, the young man enjoyed the warm rays of the sun, reading a letter with incredibly beautiful handwriting. Olivia arrived at the palace in a carriage without a coat of arms early in the morning. They say she had a tear-stained face and is planning to stay for several days without having a single thing with her. The maids whispered about what the Empress was thinking when she handed over power over the palace to this half-breed with dirty blood. Olivia looked incredibly exhausted and tired, but was it any relief that Madeline's family was not involved in these dirty rumors? All the brothers and the formidable father came out clean again from behind the water, and all the blame fell on the shoulders of the fragile girl. Most of all, she was worried about her little sister, who right now clearly had no one to console and tell her what really happened. Olivia wasn't going to leave her alone in such trouble and decided to come up with a plan to prove the whole truth. She asked the maid if it was so noticeable that she cried all night. Olivia asked to prepare everything for makeup so that she would look unsurpassed today, wanting to erase all the sadness and sorrow from her face. Wednesday was the day of the meeting with His Highness the Crown Prince, so Olivia could not go out with a tear-stained or swollen face. The Crown Prince decided not to appear alone, and the fragile arms of the caring lady tenderly embraced him. It was Lady Maria, who smiled every time she was near this man. Olivia knew she needed to prepare properly so she could finally get the dirty issues out of the way and never return to them again. The Crown Prince was chatting pleasantly with Maria, sitting in a cozy gazebo, and it seemed that the two of them did not want to see anyone else. Every day they had a good time, enjoying each other and this carefree time. While Olivia was getting ready, she noticed that her favorite expensive gray visa, brought from abroad, was missing from the dining room. She certainly didn't give orders for it to be used, but the main shelf was indeed empty. Olivia asked the maids where her expensive tea set, which was always taken out on certain occasions, had disappeared. She asked her brother if he knew what the porcelain set was usually used for. It was used for the Crown Prince's receptions at the palace every Wednesday, and there were only 2 such sets in the empire. Olivia quickly ran somewhere, wanting to figure out why the porcelain sets had disappeared without a trace without her asking. If she stops right now, sits back and does nothing, the situation will continue to get worse. The family might have left only one thing for her at times, but nothing that she had clung to before would remain. Only the memory of my beloved mother will remain, who left this world so early and did not live her happy life. All that will remain are the memories of childhood, when her brothers were kind to her and they spent their time happily. Yet she had to influence her own destiny, and without much modesty she decided to enter the Tiage Palace. She slowly approached the gazebo, where Maria Mila leaned her head on her lover's shoulder. They have already been informed that Lady Olivia is in this palace and will probably come to them soon, and that same expensive service was displayed on the tea table near the loving couple. Maria loved being here with Leopold on Wednesdays because he said this place was like her, and on days bathed in sunset light, it shone like her golden hair. Leopold admitted that he still holds exactly the same opinion and does not at all renounce his words. Unfortunately, every lie he said was heard by Lady Olivia, who was now standing right behind them. Maria liked to feel like Leopold's fiancée, and if Olivia came in and saw them together, it would be much more difficult to see each other. They were sure it would never happen, but Olivia was already here and knew the living truth. Leopold assured her that the lady knew how to control herself and that she would in no way cause Maria any inconvenience. The mother vouched for her daughter Olivia, and she knew that her beloved girl would always try her best, despite the evil around her. Not wanting to stay there any longer, Olivia decided to go to the darkest part of the empire to simply get lost in the crowd. She walked alone in the twilight evening, lost in her thoughts, not understanding what she should do next. Suddenly, a man warned the lady to be careful. They were demolishing an old area here, and she could run into dangerous objects. It was the same area where she had previously lived with her mother, and in the distance she saw her sweet and gentle image. She saw her mother smiling and calling her to feed her a delicious aromatic dinner. In reality, none of this happened. It was just an ordinary illusion that Olivia dreamed of seeing at least once in her life. With tears in her eyes, she rushed to run without looking back into the darkest alley, unable to bear the wild mental pain. Stopping in one of the most secluded places, she bowed her head low and felt that right then she was ready to faint from hopelessness. The familiar outlines of buildings, the smell of damp earth after a recent rain, even the cries of children playing, all of which filled her life with joy, now only intensified the bitterness of loss. Olivia came to the area where she lived with her mother, and her heart was torn apart by pain. She sat down on the damp ground, not paying attention to the cold that penetrated the thin fabric of her dress, and cried bitterly. Memories of my mother echoed in my head, warm hands, a gentle smile, wise advice. Everything was gone, vanished forever, leaving behind a gaping void. Suddenly she heard approaching footsteps. Perhaps it was a robber, and she needed to call someone for help. She couldn't even imagine who she could ask for this, because she was known as a dirty half-breed with emerald green eyes. A sudden light illuminated the dark alley. Edwin appeared in front of her and asked if the lady had enjoyed the walk. All this time he had been waiting to escort her, and the lady looked with frightened eyes at his sudden appearance. Edwin asked if the lady had any business in the city to be here at such a time. He was definitely not ready to leave her here alone, putting a warm fur coat on the girl's shoulders so that she would warm up faster. Like a little abandoned puppy, she looked at her savior, and in fact, he had been following her all this time. Olivia didn't understand why the gentleman was expressing such concern, since they were absolutely nothing to each other. Edwin admitted that he did it for one reason, simply because she missed him and wanted to see her sweet face again. Olivia had never heard such tender words. She felt they came from the heart, and tears appeared in her eyes again. She felt care and support from Edwin, who at that time carefully covered her with a warm cloak. She couldn't hold back any longer. Olivia burst into tears and fell face down on the young gentleman who was the only light in her life. She said that now she has absolutely nowhere to go, and she doesn't understand what to do next. Everyone who was so dear to her turned away from her, and even her beloved younger sister now considers her her worst enemy. Edwin saw that the girl was in complete despair. Her heart was filled with unbearable longing and pain. Lightly touching her snow-white hair, he confessed that everyone in his mansion was eagerly awaiting her return. Sitting in a dark alley, where the night stars were already illuminating the sky, the gentleman invited Olivia to come to him. The girl did not have the strength to resist or refuse, and as soon as she touched the bed, she immediately fell asleep, and when the assistant heard that she had disappeared into the imperial palace, everyone was incredibly scared. It turned out to be a great fortune that Edwin unexpectedly managed to find her, because the lady would certainly have disappeared in this dark alley. He wondered who this lady was who had sent humanitarian aid and more than 5 letters without receiving a single response. Olivia continued to supply the front without advertising her activities, the person who sent medicines and what was really needed. A lady who even decided to use the pseudonym Liv Green to send aid so that no one would guess who she really was. And in the letters, which became increasingly longer, she indicated that she was eagerly awaiting the return of the knights to their loving families and shared her sorrows. She spoke of the happiness of walking the streets with her fiancé and always wished that the knights would soon be home. Each time Edwin tried to bring the letter to Jade, he categorically refused to accept them. And as soon as he realized that this letter was from his sister, he would become incredibly angry and never bring him such letters again. None of the knights understood what had happened, and it is said that the vice-captain's sister simply sent a letter. The young man crumpled each letter, tearing it into small pieces, and asked that everything connected with this lady be immediately thrown away. One day, Edwin picked up one of the letters, purely out of interest, deciding to read what was written there. It was the same paper, the same briefcase, and most importantly, the same signature, Olivia Madeline. She was called an arrogant and shameless girl, a disgrace to the Madeline family, a half-breed with green eyes, but in her letters she wrote that she lived with her family in happiness and joy. Edwin chuckled and thought, it turns out the beautiful lady was a liar, and was only trying to hide all the horror that was actually happening. One of Olivia's letters contained the hope of meeting on a certain street after all the fighting was over. Edwin never sent her his last letter, and now he answered every letter personally. Unfortunately, they never met there, and fate had a different scenario in store for them. The gentleman asked to show friendliness to the lady so that she could quickly get used to the new estate. The assistant did not understand why Edwina needed this, and no matter how he felt about her, this lady was considered a disgrace. Olivia is the daughter of the head of the Madeline family, supporters of the emperor, and the fiancée of the treacherous crown prince. There are many in the Viconder's domain who cannot stand the Duke of Madeline, and he was one of them. In fact, Edwin also hated the emperor, but it is impossible not to love the lady. After all, everyone praised her so much, calling her an angel, and one day she sent a turkey during the war, and the knights were incredibly happy about it. Only now did his assistant learn that all the aid had been sent by this girl, and he ordered him to keep this information to himself, because even if he started with a clean slate, the lady would definitely charm everyone. And even if she forgets about him, absolutely nothing will change in the future. Looking out the huge window, the delighted Edwin understood that the lady would soon definitely become his best wife, no matter what anyone said to the contrary. The maid came to my lady early in the morning. Her name was Hannah, and today she was supposed to serve her. She allowed herself to be helped to tidy up by Olivia, because after everything that had happened, the girl really did look tired. Olivia stood silently. She didn't want to talk to anyone, but she felt much better in this place. The maid was surprised why the lady got up so early, since yesterday she had returned quite late. Since childhood, Olivia had developed the habit of getting up with the early rays of the sun, as soon as her mother called her for breakfast. The mansion's chef was very happy about Olivia's arrival and was ready to prepare the most incredible dishes to suit her taste. Olivia's first thought was to ask about something other than her preferences. She decided to find out if his lordship was having breakfast today, and she probably wanted to see him. Mr. Edwin sometimes skipped breakfast, sometimes ate, sometimes not, and it all depended on his work affairs. The first thing she wanted to do was to see him, and she went into one of the rooms, hoping that the gentleman would be there. She even jumped in surprise, because a voice behind her asked if the pleasant lady had really lost someone. Edwin was standing right behind her, and Olivia's eyes were wide with fear, not expecting to see him right next to her. This made the two laugh incredibly, because at that moment the lady looked like a small, fluffy, frightened rabbit. A slight blush appeared on her face, but she did not feel constrained at all. On the contrary, she even felt pleasant. If she had said so earlier, the Duke would have appeared in the dining room much earlier, but they had not agreed on anything. Meat can be a heavy meal in the morning, so the gentleman asked for something light to be prepared, and they sat together at the small round dining table. Olivia thanked him for the warm welcome, but she didn't know how much inconvenience she could cause him for a while. Olivia warned that if something needed to be done, the gentleman must definitely warn about it, and she was not going to sit on his neck at all. She once handled the finances of the ducal house and the crown princess's palace very well, and she has some experience in managing the affairs of the imperial palace. Edwin thought for a moment and asked if the girl was really up to the task and if she could really be useful. In fact, the gentleman had many desires that these women could cope with perfectly. At Madeline's residence for the third day already, the young mistress did not let anyone into her room and did not even eat anything. The tailor from Madame Pluto's studio had already arrived, but the situation was too tense. The girl did not let anyone into her room. Madame Pluto greeted the ladies and was called in to sort out the situation. Earlier, Lady Olivia Madeline personally contacted the studio for her younger sister, and today we arrived a little late. Judging by the crowd of maids outside the mistress's room, Pluto realized that something strange was going on here. With a puzzled look on her face, the lady asked if something had happened since everyone was so tense. The maids were unhappy, the mistress ran away, and is now trying to gain favor and shower her younger sister with gifts, and she probably ordered tailors yesterday so she could return as if nothing had happened. Lady Pluto was sure that there seemed to be some misunderstanding, and the order had been made 3 weeks ago. The order turned out to be 3 weeks old, when the girls were passing by a luxurious salon while strolling along the small streets of the city. Even the younger sister didn't imagine that Olivia was secretly planning to surprise her, and they did this to her. She looked in shock at Madame Pluto, who confirmed that the recording had indeed been made 3 weeks ago. The lady was planning to visit them last week, but due to some circumstances the visit took place only today. Isela asked how the lady dared to lie so brazenly, but it was absolutely true. The maid burst into tears and said that 3 weeks ago Lady Olivia had passed by the boutique and seen a beautiful outfit, and she thought it would be perfect for her little sister. She didn't know about the rest, but the lady certainly wouldn't call Madame Pluto now that the princess had made it clear that Olivia had killed her mother. Now Isela didn't know who to believe in this family, who was blatantly lying and who was really telling the truth. She felt broken because saying goodbye to my sister was the most pleasant thing I had ever experienced. They used to have a good time. The younger sister carefully did Olivia's hair and told her funny stories. Now she brazenly threw the precious necklace right in the face of Olivia, who just wanted to give her a nice gift. Isela's heart was broken completely by the blatant lies, the real truth that was happening in her family. She clutched the gift necklace tightly in her hands, but her beloved little sister was no longer there. The lady cried bitterly, sitting outside her room, and only prayed that her sister would understand everything and come back. While the heroes were discussing their wishes, Edwin admitted that he had a lot of interesting things in mind. Olivia hadn't even imagined that he could ask, of course, excluding generally accepted concepts. The young man laughed out loud because he understood perfectly well that the girl was probably thinking about the most unflattering point. He defined them himself. There will be few points, only 3. Firstly, a lady should not forget about meals. Secondly, get a good night's sleep. And thirdly, do what she wants. And if it came to that, he was only happy to help her and assist her so that Olivia could finally start living a happy life. She tried to understand what this strange gentleman wanted from her, who let her into his house and allowed her to do whatever she wanted. On the one hand, it seemed strange to her, as if he was mocking her, but then why did he even need all this? If the conversation continued in this vein, Olivia realized that her fragile soul would not be able to withstand it, and she decided to leave for a minute. Edwin was upset. It seemed to him that the girl wanted him to leave, but Olivia explained that he had misunderstood everything. A knight named Winster, who entered the dining hall, admitted that they missed the noble lady incredibly. He was ordered to come exactly on time and greet my lady, and that is precisely why he came right now. It turned out that Edwin had asked to do this yesterday, as soon as the lady crossed the threshold of the mansion. It was clear from all the inhabitants of the estate that they greeted the lady with pride, and even the maid looked into her eyes with care, smiled, and only wished her happiness. They were really looking forward to Lady Olivia, waiting for her appearance so they could meet the beautiful lady in person. The girl was a little frightened by such close attention, and the heroes even suggested that perhaps they had embarrassed her in some way. Delicious food and a comfortable bed, an extensive library, and excellent living conditions certainly could not indicate otherwise. The heroine felt simply wonderful. She was in a new, cozy, pleasant, and warm environment, and did not feel at all that she was being treated badly. Edwin may be very busy right now, but he put all his work aside just to have a nice chat. During the trapeze, he didn't give the slightest hint of this and was in no hurry. The maid asked why Olivia was sighing and saddened and still could not completely relax. There was one small reason. The lady here did not have a diary, and she used to have a habit of keeping various notes. The lady happily promised to bring the best notebook for writing right away and asked if the lady would like anything else. Edwin was incredibly happy that he was able to help the poor girl, and now she feels well. He asked her again if she was ready to fulfill her promises, and right now the heroine held them tightly in her hands. As for food, they ate together, so the first point would not need to be checked, which could not be said about the second, and the gentleman hoped the lady was sleeping peacefully. But there was one more third point that he was worried about, but Olivia had already quickly managed to forget it. And did she really do something wrong? Because Edwin definitely saw her sad face, and he could have bought the most beautiful diary on his own. Olivia thanked him again for the warm welcome, care, and kindness, but it still seemed like something had happened to her. Therefore, tomorrow she promised to return to the ducal estate so as not to interfere with the gentleman living his normal life. The day before, luxurious dresses and jewelry should be brought in tomorrow. The last day of the feast in honor of the victory should take place. And as the crown prince's bride, Olivia could not miss this grand event. And if she didn't show up at the feast, all fingers would point only at him, and Olivia didn't want to tarnish Edwin's honor. To avoid this, she understood that she would have to go with him, despite the new absurd rumors. In fact, Edwin was not angry at all. He just did not understand one small point. Why, even after being given permission to use him as she pleases, does she still hold back? After all, he has always been a protector, and for as long as he can remember, he has longed for only one thing all his life, something priceless, and he met her. Therefore, taking her hands, Edwin confessed that Olivia had become the most precious person to him, and that is exactly how he could call her. On the next and last day of the feast, people did nothing but talk about Olivia's disappearance. The crown prince stated that there were rumors that she had gone missing, and explained to his father that this was causing them great inconvenience. The father knew his daughter very well. Olivia had never been an irresponsible child, and as the bride of the crown prince, she was obliged to attend the celebration and behave appropriately. Today her appearance was obligatory, and her fiancé and father were eagerly awaiting the arrival of Olivia Madeline. Suddenly, an announcement was heard in the hall. Grand Duke Edwin Lowell Vikander, an honorary knight of the Empire, had arrived. He arrived with his companion, Lady Olivia Madeline, and none of the heroes were expecting such a turn of events. The upcoming meeting could decide her fate, dispel the slander that had been cast upon her, or completely destroy her. Lady Olivia arrived in a delicate white dress, her pearly long hair flowing like a river of moonlight, framing a face touched by sadness and at the same time an unbroken will. Olivia felt their wary gazes, filled with mixed feelings of pity, curiosity, and perhaps even fear. No one expected the appearance of this couple. The heroes went to the emperor to greet his highness. She walked with the grace that only true aristocrats possess, but in her every movement there was a subtle sense of anxiety. Edwin loudly greeted the great son of the empire, a malicious grin on his face. The gentleman immediately noted that the great Archduke Edwin came today in the company of a lady, and this is simply incredible. The young man said that it was all thanks to the emperor's grace. He was grateful to him for such a wonderful opportunity. Edwin asked whether the emperor remembered the freedom he had awarded him on the first day of the feast. When the lord asked for permission to marry the most precious Lady Olivia Madeline, the emperor then agreed. Something strange was happening here. Had His Grace the Duke just proposed to Lady Madeline, but since he was asking permission from the emperor, it meant he had already succeeded in marrying her. In any case, not a single day goes by peacefully for this lady, and now she is the center of general gossip and rumors among the aristocrats. The lady was about to greet the son of the empire and bow, but the next second an unpleasant aura filled the hall, and Olivia looked at the Duke in fear, who made her understand that she was completely safe. Because Leopold was already approaching them, asking whether Edwin had really dared to propose to his bride right in front of the emperor. These young men were a kind of opposition to each other, and Leopold was even having an affair with another girl, presenting himself as a noble gentleman. He put his hand forward and asked Olivia to come to him, confident that the girl would follow him. He didn't like this dress either. Olivia had a completely different outfit prepared for this holiday, and Leopold made it clear once again that light colors did not suit her white hair at all, and she should look completely different. Leopold began to insult the lady confidently and loudly, and at that moment Edwin covered her with his body so that she would not see this terrible scoundrel. He stated that from now on the gentleman could send Lady Madeline's outfits directly to his mansion. The conversation turned to jewelry, and he declared that giving a lady jewelry that suits her is one of the greatest pleasures. Olivia didn't know how this whole horror could end, and she really wanted Leopold to finally leave her alone. Last night, at the Duke's residence, they rehearsed the speech in which Edwin asked for Milady's hand, using the right given by the Emperor. Olivia seemed a little surprised, but the gentleman was just trying to fulfill her request, and in fact, this was the best way. The surest way to distance yourself from everything that is happening, from Leopold, from your father, and from your so-called family. Olivia herself knew that the gentleman's personal motives were also involved here, and he would not do anything just like that. However, the girl was still worried and had strong doubts because she had always been a dirty, lonely half-breed. And now she is under the close attention of the emperor and other aristocrats who treat her with disdain. Edwin tried to calm the lady down and asked her in a gentle voice not to worry, warning her that he would not use the offer as an excuse to force her to do anything. This may sound funny, and the word instead would be more appropriate here than anything else. Edwin still had only one small wish, and at the next day's ball he asked the girl to look only at him. He warned the lady not to hear whoever approached her. She should stay close to him and not take to heart all the statements of the villains. And he promised that no matter what happened, at this ball, even in front of the emperor himself, he would definitely stand up for her. A deathly silence reigned in the hall. The aristocrats watched what was happening, and everyone was interested in what would happen next. The girl's father showed up at the event and said he needed some time to think things over. He had no idea that the rumors about Olivia and the Duke were actually true, but now he was convinced of it. While everyone was enjoying the holiday, the emperor allowed the Duke to talk to the lady. Edwin asked the lady what she wanted to do and whether she was really ready to talk to her father in person. In fact, Olivia was so disappointed with her relative's behavior that she didn't even know if it was worth doing. For the first time all evening, her father would say a word to her, and she was worried that this moment would probably look stupid. Edwin gave her all the support she needed. The girl looked absolutely beautiful, and she had to follow her heart. The gentleman only thought that the Duke was very lucky to have the opportunity to talk to his daughter, because today was his last chance to talk to Olivia, who never wished harm on his family. The Duke bowed low in greeting to His Serene Highness the Archduke and asked permission to speak with his daughter. Edwin only replied menacingly. Her own words were much more important than his, and only Olivia decided here. He looked into her eyes again, and the girl understood that she had finally found that very support. She quietly asked her father what had happened and why he was so insistent on a private conversation. The gentleman suggested to start by changing the location to a more suitable one without prying eyes and ears. Taking their father's arm, the heroes went to a secluded room, and Edwin decided to warn the Duke once again, so that he would not waste this opportunity under any circumstances, and perhaps in the future he would hardly be able to see his daughter. The heroes went out onto a secluded balcony. Olivia thought everything would go well, but her father immediately angrily grabbed her by the shoulders. The man shouted loudly about what kind of tricks this impudent scoundrel had pulled in front of all the aristocrats, and even in front of the great emperor. He had no idea that the girl had managed to whisper to this gentleman that he himself was asking for permission to marry her, the legal bride of the crown prince. Olivia looked at her angry father in silence. She saw only horror, rage, and anger in him, and not a drop of understanding. There was a mixture of disappointment and pain in his gaze, as if a favorite porcelain figurine had cracked, leaving a scar on the heart. Now she stood before him, surrounded by a shadow of suspicion, like an angel stained with dirt. The Duke was sure that Olivia would pay in front of him, but the girl proudly raised her head and looked her angry father straight into his hateful eyes. He wanted to hurt her as much as possible. He continued to push, but the lady only laughed loudly at his behavior. Turning around, Olivia admitted that she thought that one day her father would look at her with the tenderness with which he should look at his daughter. When she was little, she dreamed that one day this unknown man would recognize her as his daughter. She believed it and never doubted it. She hadn't asked Edwin to propose, but she knew that all this time Maria had been circling around the crown prince, and he had been cooing with her, and now they were expecting a child, and these words were enough to explain everything. And it was the father who brought little Olivia to the mansion to send her to the crown prince as a bride instead of his youngest daughter, and this was absolutely true. Rage filled the father's soul. He blamed Olivia, because if she had not entered his house, nothing like this would have happened, and it was she who made him unhappy. Clenching his fist tightly, shaking with anger, he screamed that all the misfortunes in his life happened solely because of this vile girl. Olivia knew only her truth, which was the real reality, both now and then. She had done nothing wrong, was not guilty of anything, and the terrible tragedy turned out to be just an accident. The gentleman himself said that he wanted to have nothing to do with her, and if he could, he would erase her from his life forever. And now Olivia has a man for whom she was a treasure, and whom he is unlikely to want to let go. She no longer trusted her father, she no longer trusted her brothers, and she no longer trusted anyone but herself. Even little Isella decided to go down the dark path, and it was as if she forgot that the only person she trusted was Olivia. She didn't even have any hope for her brothers, because as soon as they grew up, they immediately began to hate this girl. There was still the princess who dared to tell the young lady the whole truth that her mother had died because of Olivia. And the main villain in this story was the crown prince, who had long been in love with another, and simply mocked the lady. Before the ball, Olivia asked the gentleman if he would really arrange everything as she said. And then Edwin promised. He constantly admitted that he was ready to do anything for Olivia. That evening she trusted him. The young man stood before her on his knees, with sincere eyes and a loving heart. And he was the only one who could help her, and Olivia firmly decided to break all the threads, to forget about everything that she loved so much in her family. With complete confidence, she told her father that she no longer had anything to do with Madeline's house, and he could completely erase her from his memory. And in her memory there will remain only pleasant childhood memories, when there was no discord in the family yet, and she was a part of them. But unfortunately, that time has long passed. The lady has a new life, happy, and without contempt. Yes, it is always very difficult to say goodbye to the old, and it is necessary to step out of your comfort zone in order to find new happiness. And she drew this red line between herself and Madeline's family in order to forget forever about the terrible treatment she received. She no longer considered any of these people to be her relatives and was ready to forget their names forever. Because at one point everyone simply turned away from her, leaving her alone, a dirty half-breed. The father shouted her name loudly again and declared that the conversation would be over from that moment on. because a respectable gentleman had already approached them and warned the Duke that threatening the precious lady was not at all his priority. Edwin said menacingly, the Vikander family would immediately turn into their enemy if he dared to lay a finger on his future bride. The appearance of the young man immediately diffused the tense situation. He took the lady by the arm and invited her to enjoy the wonderful event. He didn't let her down for a second and did everything exactly as he promised. And in his bright red eyes was reflected the sweet girl whom he wanted to please and make happy for the rest of his days. Olivia no longer doubted her choice one bit. It was obvious who wanted her well and who wanted to destroy her. Not wanting to spoil the wonderful event, Olivia approached Evan and suggested that they go back. She wanted to go back to the banquet hall, not home at all, and just wanted to have a good time. It was not for nothing that she spent so much time getting dressed today, and in this luxurious dress she decided to shine before all the contemptuous glances. After all, she should have danced at least once in complete peace and experienced a magnificent dance. Her hands were still shaking, but she took the venerable gentleman's arm, filled with confidence, ready to go into a new life. Edwin was incredibly happy that the girl did not even cry once and did not fall for her father's menacing tricks. And of course she must certainly give him the honor of taking the first dance, and after these words the lady smiled tenderly. Lady Olivia put all her terrible thoughts aside, relaxed, and simply went dancing with Edwin in front of everyone. It was a challenge, bold and daring, thrown down to a hypocritical society that was eager to see her broken. Under the gaze of surprise, condemnation, and envy, she allowed the music to take hold of her. Deep down they felt a certain heaviness, and if the lady had refused, the gentleman would have been very upset. Olivia felt the warmth of his palm, the confidence of his support, and for the first time in a long time, she felt not like a victim, but a full-fledged participant in life. His Majesty the Emperor left his seat, and without permission at that, and many people had a difficult day today. The Crown Prince looked with hatred at the beautiful dancing couple, realizing that in this story he was the loser. The Crown Prince was glaring at them, but the gentleman was happily twirling around in a waltz, and he only noticed this now. At that moment, Olivia felt a strength that she had long suppressed within herself, a strength capable of resisting slander, envy, and evil. He continued to stare at them, a cheeky smile appearing on his face, as if he was about to do something. It was the girl's brother who angrily grabbed her by the shoulder. Right during the waltz, the young man shouted, "They need to talk right now and do it as soon as possible." He was not at all embarrassed that the girl was being danced by the gentleman right now, and it was as if he was not at all afraid of his anger. The young man turned to Edwin and stated that he wished to speak with Olivia and asked his lordship to step aside. Edwin, not expecting such impudence, asked whether the young man was always so unblessed and could not even greet an aristocrat properly. He didn't see the point, especially after the day when, at the victory feast, it turned out that the intelligence data was false. The Archduke merely grinned, spread his hands, and said with a grin what a terrible shame it was. Perhaps someone deliberately gave false information to get the gentleman out of the way when he was about to take the oath to Olivia. Olivia didn't suspect anything about this, and the gentleman suggested that they go back to the mansion so that no one would bother them anymore. Carden was incredibly angry. He shouted his sister's name and tried in every way to stop her. The brother angrily insisted that his sister pay attention to him right now and give him some time. Olivia was no longer going to have anything to do with these people who had made her out to be the worst lady in the empire. She confidently stated that she had nothing more to discuss with this man, as well as with his father. The young man could not contain his angry emotions, grabbed the girl by the hand, and declared where she had been all this time and whether she was really in the Duke's residence. They supposedly have enough problems without this. The youngest daughter almost never leaves her room and constantly cries and screams. Even now, he blamed her for Acela continuing to cry and be angry at her older sister, unable to bear the terrible deception. The young man asked to stop getting on everyone's nerves and go home right now, and finally stop resisting. Unfortunately, he hardly understood that this was not stubbornness, but her true desire to forever sever ties with the impudent deceivers. She asked where he was calling her since Olivia was no longer home, and Madeline's family was no longer there. He wanted to drag her back by any means necessary, and the Crown Prince had huge plans for this wedding. For the good of the state, Archduke Vikander had to swear allegiance to the Empress, but Olivia was again to blame for everything because of her. His mother died. All their lives, these two plotted dirty tricks and tried to break through to the top of power, even using their own mother. Next came the youngest daughter, who could be successfully married off, and each time the young people discussed this among themselves. One day, when Olivia was still a very young baby, her older brother suddenly burst into her room. She didn't expect him to show up and was calmly getting ready to go to bed, but that night turned out to be too crazy. The lady thought that the fool had thrown frogs into her room again, and she had no idea who was so brazenly knocking on her door. It really was Jade's younger brother, who for some unknown reason decided to visit his little sister at such a late hour. The little girl couldn't understand what was happening, and her brother smelled very strongly of alcohol, which didn't bode well. She had already closed her eyes, afraid of his unexpected fire, and was waiting to see what he would do next. But for some reason, the brother cried bitterly and asked why Olivia was alive, and he was at war. Jade placed a cute plush bunny into the girl's hand, and Olivia hugged it carefully. Jade admitted that he actually really hoped that everything would be fine in their family, but unfortunately, everything turned out just awful. The delicious food was getting cold on the table, but Olivia didn't have the slightest appetite. That day, she did not touch food, and sitting with sad eyes at the table, she tried to understand what was happening. Her father and brother had crossed all boundaries, and in this unpleasant situation, Jade was the only ray of light for her. After his mother's death, he went over to his father's side, and each time he turned to his sister with hatred, claiming that everything happened only because of her. Every day he viciously blamed the little girl for her mother's death, and she felt more and more terrible every day. These people were on different sides, the girl's life turned out differently, and the hated brother was left alone with his dark heart. As soon as he learned that the Duke had started giving his sister gifts, he immediately understood what was going on. He called her a stupid girl who didn't even know what kind of person the Archduke really was. At some point, he felt incredible loneliness in his soul, because his sister very quickly distanced herself from him because of the Duke. And the young man never found peace within himself, and he hated the lady even more than before, because now he had a new reason. And now he had finally decided he no longer had a sister, not a single word remained, and he was ready to say goodbye to Lady Madeline forever. The young man sighed heavily, and the sound echoed throughout the vast, cold hall, foreshadowing the storm that was about to break out. And despite the supposed family ties, Olivia confidently declared that the young man should disappear from her life forever. He was also from Madeline's family. She warned that she had told her father the same thing, and from that very moment they were no longer related to each other. Jade was already a grown man, but the little boy sitting somewhere inside still couldn't believe it. Olivia smiled and said tenderly in front of everyone that Madeline's family would disappear from her life forever, and she would no longer have any connection with these people. For her, they were once her home, her everything, her hope and support, but unfortunately, now everything has changed. She took the gentleman's arm and turned around, saying goodbye to her younger brother Jade, with whom she had spent a wonderful childhood. The first to greet the heroes was a cheerful maid. They returned very early, and Olivia herself said that she does not particularly like balls. Finally, they were home, in a cozy, warm environment, and Edwin was a little hungry, and it was good that nothing happened on the way. At that moment, he was incredibly happy to be back with Olivia, and just wanted to sit down and have a delicious dinner. Something unexpected happened. Lady Olivia, who had been standing firmly on her feet, simply collapsed to the floor and closed her eyes. Edwin rushed to her aid, but the girl looked so exhausted as if she had been through an entire battlefield. Her face was covered in cold sweat, she was shaking all over, and no one understood what had happened to her. When the heroine lost consciousness, she found herself in another reality, where she was still a very naive, green-eyed little baby. She was sitting somewhere near the river, looking around, and not understanding how she ended up there. She remembered that she had just recently been to a ball and needed to make a diary entry about the evening. As soon as she thought about it, a red book appeared in front of her, and it seemed that Lady Hannah had already managed to buy a new beautiful diary. But looking into the distance, she saw all her old, past, written diaries, on the pages of which the brightest memories were kept. This world was black and white, and Olivia took her first diary, which she wrote as a very little girl. The little girl was incredibly naive. She believed everyone, and was sure that the appearance of Madeline in the family was the truest happiness that fate had in store for her. She still hadn't regained consciousness, and taking up a pen, she wrote in one diary that she was no longer guilty of anything and hadn't done anything. These words made the little girl feel incredibly better. All her life she had been instilled with guilt, which had torn her heart to pieces. After this phrase, she saw herself as a grown-up girl who, since childhood, had blamed herself for something incomprehensible. And now, sitting in this black and white world, she screamed loudly, freeing her soul from the evil, hateful shackles, wanting to be free forever. All this time she lay unconscious in bed, and Edwin and the famous doctor did not understand how serious things were. The doctor pointed out the lack of sleep, nutrients, dehydration in general. The lady was lacking everything. She held on until she arrived at the mansion, but for some reason she suddenly fainted as soon as it was all over. And if there is no particular reason, it seems like everything she has been enduring for so long has burst out, or she has simply relaxed and let go of all the pain. The doctor suggested looking at the back of the lady's hand, and the skin on her hand spoke volumes. In her gentle hands, the gentleman could not even imagine how much she had to endure in this fragile body. And after all this, she worried about him under the name Liv Green, when she had enough of her own worries. And these fools, these blockheads, did terrible things to her, and were still unable to see the most valuable treasure in the world. None of these people ever realized that Olivia was the kindest person in their family, with a warm soul and an incredibly huge, noble heart. The doctor asked the gentleman to make the lady as nervous as possible. The most important thing now was to ensure her good rest. Edwin decided to meet with the emperor in order to quietly take his lady into the possession of the Grand Duke. A few days later, Olivia finally woke up, still worried that she had caused the master too much trouble. In any case, the doctor told her to get plenty of rest, eat a balanced diet, and take her medications regularly. All the inhabitants of the ducal estate were happy to be nearby, but Olivia thought that she had already rested enough. She took up reading books and could not lie in bed for long without feeling burdened. She slowly walked around the mansion to check if anything was needed while no one was looking. However, the head maid noticed this and angrily declared that the lady really did need to rest and eat better. Hannah was absolutely right, and Edwin decided to talk to the cooks to make more nutritious food. Edwin asked Hannah to remove everything that could disturb the lady so that she could rest properly and not be distracted by anything. Hannah happily went to carry out her master's order and went to the kitchen to bring delicious hot soup and medicine. Sitting in her warm, cozy bed, Olivia still felt like she was too much trouble, and even when they brought her delicious, aromatic hot soup, she refused to eat it, and the Archduke, like a little girl, tried to feed her with a spoon. This shameless man looked incredibly cute, and Olivia couldn't help but follow his order. It was so cute that she became embarrassed and said that she could eat on her own and didn't need to be fed like a little one. The gentleman asked the lady not to speak so loudly. Her throat still hurt a lot, and it was necessary to remain quiet. Edwin began to hum a pleasant tune while Olivia squirmed like a first grader. The spoon was almost to her mouth, and Olivia's gaze became more and more serious. The young man warned that if she continued to refuse, he would feed her this way every time from now on. Olivia needed to regain her strength, and that was the only way he could influence her. As soon as the lady imagined that she would have to endure this horror every day and more than once, she realized that it was still worth eating herself. At last the hot soup was finished, and now it was necessary to take the medicine prescribed by the doctor. Luckily, there were no problems with the medicine. Olivia drank it quickly, realizing how important it was for her health. The medicine smelled like raspberries and tasted very pleasant. It was sweet, like the juiciest ripe berry. And for a moment, Olivia even felt a little happy, but in fact the gentleman had simply added honey to it. Everyone knew that sweets make you fat quickly, but all medicines usually taste bad. But here the medicine was not bitter at all, but sweet, and after dinner Olivia felt that she really wanted to sleep. Feeling how the girl was getting better, Edwin himself felt good to see her in a good mood. She must have been feeling sleepy because of the medicine, and the gentleman carefully wrapped the lady in a blanket and suggested that she sleep a little to restore her vitality. Estella's younger sister couldn't find peace after what happened, and finally, late in the evening, she decided to leave her room. And from the other room came the voices of the maids, who were definitely saying something to the older lady. They say she received a marriage proposal from that very same murderer, the monster Grand Duke, and is she really being deprived of her position as crown princess or simply kicked out of the estate? They whispered that he asked for this as a wish granted by the emperor, so they should get married very soon. The younger sister couldn't believe that Olivia would marry a man who was called a monster from the battlefield and a real demon. She remembered her little sister. She was once happy that the crown prince sent her flowers. She was incredibly happy. Estella ran to her room, ready to burst into tears right there and then, because she finally learned another truth. She was sure that no matter how much she and her sister quarreled, she definitely couldn't do this, because she was the only kind person in her life. After all, her sister loved His Highness the Crown Prince so much, and no matter what happened, Estella decided to stop it as soon as possible. But she had no right to do this, and it was unlikely that she could influence the decision of her older adult sister, who had already chosen another man. The ladies often said that all green-eyed girls were liars, and that mother had died because of that green-eyed girl, and the princess insisted on it so fiercely. Now something had changed in the young lady's head, and she was sure that she must certainly help her older sister. She was still not herself, and wanted to prove that Edwin was the most terrible person in the world who decided to stand between her and the prince. That same night, she ran to her father to express her opinion and listen to what he had to say. Stopping near the half-open door, she heard them discussing the impossibility of pushing Estella into the place of crown princess instead of Olivia. Her father and brothers were discussing how they should bring Olivia back because she was the only one destined for this purpose, and now the little girl seemed to hear how her heart was finally shattered into pieces. The brother assured her that if the younger sister became a princess, she would wither and die from the poison of the imperial palace. There is no way my father could watch this, even if he is the darkest man in the world. Now the young lady was just a toy in the imperial system where she could not take the leading role. She believed that her brothers wished her well, but in reality she became a puppet in their cunning hands. And now she didn't even know which of them was real or sincere, and only felt a pathetic deception. She glanced at her brother, wanting to see some humanity in him as he asked the lady to follow him. Estella screamed to her brother Jade what it all meant, and she couldn't believe that it all turned out to be the terrible truth. Her rosy fantasy world collapsed right now. Everything turned out to be a big lie that she believed in her whole life. And here there is only one truth, that the sister will soon become the rightful crown princess, and Estella will be of no use to anyone. With excitement in her eyes, the girl asked her brother if it was really because of her that everything happened, but he could not answer. She asked him to say that this was a blatant lie, but her brother only assured her that his younger sister had a fever and did not understand at all what she was saying. Now the young lady wanted to get the truth. She screamed loudly in despair and wanted to never be deceived again. The position of crown princess originally belonged to her, but it turned out that her sister was brought in solely for this purpose. Now the puzzle was coming together. Olivia suddenly had a sister, and the family didn't bring her out into the world, as if hiding her, and the servants who communicated with her sister as if she didn't exist. The sister also cried like this every night after returning from the palace, and was engaged to the prince. And little Olivia loved her mother incredibly much, and only now Estella understood everything. No matter how hard you try to hide a lie, it will still become true at some point, and now it has been revealed to the young lady. Every morning in Olivia's new life was simply wonderful, and today she finally opened the first page of her new diary. The door opened and Edwin entered. "I want to know how the girl is feeling." She thanked him again for his concern, and yet there was something she was doing that was a bit too strange. Namely, that the honorable gentleman removed absolutely all the books so that the lady did not even have the opportunity to occupy herself with reading. Olivia insisted that reading was a must during rest time, but Edwin didn't think so, and during rest time people just lie around and enjoy a good time. It's called bed rest, and Olivia was sure she was completely recovered. As soon as the doctor heard about the books, he declared that the girl was not yet well enough to read and that she needed to stay in bed as long as possible. Her voice was almost completely normal, her throat hardly hurt, so Olivia thought she had recovered. She continued to insist on reading and books, but the caring gentleman suggested that she go have a tasty lunch instead. She still needed to eat properly and well, and despite her impudence, Olivia understood everything and quickly agreed. The butler came in and apologized for disturbing us, but the matter was urgent. A letter had arrived from the imperial palace, one for His Majesty, and 2 letters were addressed to the lady from the crown prince and princess. The young man burst out laughing and called it sweet when the so-called family all writes at once. She also laughed because now her new family was a completely different person, and she had no idea what those unknown people wanted from her. They looked at each other as if they understood perfectly well what was being discussed, and their thoughts naturally coincided. Family still remains with family, even if in letters they still demand immediate appearance at the palace. He said it word for word, and the angry father still wrote to this day for his daughter to come home. This handwriting was strikingly different from the cards she had received before, so this was what Leopold's real letter was like, not a drop of love, and not a drop of worry. The dry lines only said that the lady would soon understand what a trap she had fallen into and lost her family. Edwin suggested sending the reply along so that it would also touch his soul, which he didn't have at all. Probably the Crown Prince was still confident that Olivia would come to her senses and return to the palace. After some time, His Highness the Crown Prince received the long-awaited answer from Lady Madeline. He was sure she would start apologizing, and he didn't even imagine that she could write to him. Surrounded by beautiful ladies, he sat comfortably on the sofa and wanted to hear what was written in the letter. To his great surprise, Olivia wrote that she was incredibly ill and would not be able to attend the event. He didn't even believe it and asked to repeat it again, because all this time he was sure that the simpleton would definitely return to him and understand everything. But he was the only simpleton in this situation, while the elegant Lady Madeline was now a completely different person. Lady Madeline didn't just haunt him, there was another heroine who thought of this man with hatred every morning. Olivia had no idea that one of the aristocrats hated the impudent girl, and every day only thought about how to make her life more terrible. Flowers were needed to decorate the next summer banquet, but Lady Madeline dared to reject her invitation. The girl was afraid that people would start to doubt, and suddenly something worse would happen than what happened last year. Besides, she needed to give an answer regarding humanitarian aid for the region, and she wanted to take it out on her during the banquet, but Madeline wasn't even planning on showing up here. The heroine didn't understand. She was getting more and more flushed every second, but Olivia still had enough courage to refuse. Olivia accepted the Grand Duke's marriage proposal. The lady called her green-eyed trash and believed that this place should belong only to her. The princess possessed untold riches, so there was no need to worry, and the emperor assured that this man would bend one knee to this girl. It happened quite differently. Edwin didn't even look at her once. All his attention was directed only to Lady Olivia. The princess was so angry that she was ready to order the knights to bring the scoundrel Lady Madeline here by the arms. The court servants asked the princess to calm down a little while she was screaming loudly, but soon Lady Olivia herself appeared before the princess. The girl threw all rules of etiquette aside and screamed furiously like crazy as soon as she saw Olivia next to her. Olivia started saying something about the grain-producing region of Tristan, the land of retail trade, a precious necklace, and also white quartz mines. The princess asked to stop, and what did the Grand Duke say that the lady came and dared to brazenly threaten her? Olivia was glad that the princess actually understood that this was a real threat and not just an empty joke. One of the aristocrats suggested that the lady show herself from a good side in exchange for asking her brother to dance with her. To prove that she was worthy of being the bride of the crown prince, she needed to pass a small test. The princess needed to solve the problem of the region suffering from the spring harvest, but now the princess asked for proof. She had to do something, according to one aristocrat, to get the covenant for the role she wanted. The words of an illegitimate person or the heir to the throne, and what will people believe in such a situation? Olivia provided a detailed account of her personal expenses, and while the princess was visiting underground auctions in search of the necklace, Olivia was spending her funds to restore the lands that were falling on hard times. The princess called it a blatant lie, and did Olivia really want to say that she obeyed her orders and started a second ledger, and the servants who were watching her did not tell her anything? This was not a second ledger, but a record of Olivia's personal expenses, and the emperor ordered that they be sorted out completely, using his own funds. And now the lady had all the information about these expenses, and this could be the end of the situation. Of course, such documents can be forged, but the princess understood perfectly well that all this was true. Olivia admitted that she was not going to disclose this information, and that the princess had brazenly squandered the imperial budget. She only came to ask the lady for a favor, which she no longer had any option to refuse. The lady burst out laughing and couldn't even imagine what this girl could offer her in return. She looked menacingly at Olivia and asked if she really wanted to resolve the issue of the favor after all the threats. But Olivia needed a decent dowry before the wedding, and she had long ago thought out a wonderful plan. The princess had no intention of playing her games or giving in so easily, and in front of Olivia's eyes, she simply tore up the document, calling everything that is happening complete nonsense, and it is unlikely that anyone will be able to catch her red-handed. The original copy was still in Lady Olivia's possession, and of course she kept it a secret. The princess wanted to receive it right away, but Olivia warned the girl to kindly prepare the necessary dowry for her. The princess laughed and asked what would happen if she refused such a ridiculous offer. In that case, Olivia was going to tell everything to the emperor himself, and he would resolve the issue differently with his daughter Reina, who was involved in unpleasant affairs. Reina understood that if the green-eyed girl dared to spread the contents of the document, her father's trust in her would completely dry up, and no matter how much she resisted, she had to ask what Olivia wanted to inherit, and she spoke about the lands of Minerva. She dared to ask for the 5th richest territory of all her possessions, and even offered the region of Javiel. Reina tried to calm down and not get nervous in order to make the right and balanced decision. She needed to choose something that would do no good, but would make this girl shut up forever. Reina stated that there were some lands that would be suitable as a dowry. Her father said that one day these possessions would be useful to her, but who would have thought that they turned out to be completely useless? These places should have been known to Olivia, the White Quartz mines, and she must have heard about them. It seemed that Olivia had really taken a great interest in them before, and now the princess prayed that she would agree. These mines had no meaning to her, but still they belonged exclusively to her. The abandoned mines themselves weren't of interest to the princess. She wanted to learn about the reports related to them, which were kept secret, and despite the value of these lands, only the imperial family had access to those documents. The princess always said she was too busy to deal with ridiculous paperwork herself. From the last visit, everyone knew that the mineral deposits here had long since dried up. This place is now completely useless, so why not give them to Olivia, who so fiercely desires a dowry? Reina suggested that Olivia think it over carefully, since the rest of her possessions were too far from those belonging to Vikander. These mines will be convenient to manage. They are located in the north, and the princess asked that a decision be made as soon as possible. Olivia felt that everything could not be so simple, and the princess was definitely not going to give up the expensive mines. On this beautiful sunny morning, Edwin was waiting for his beloved to return, humming a beautiful melody. He sensed that she was somewhere nearby and turned around to see if his instincts were wrong. Seeing the girl from afar, his face broke into a sweet smile. He was incredibly happy that she had finally returned. Olivia apologized. She was a little late while talking to the princess, but now she was finally by his side again. And now she offered the gentleman a tour of the Tiage Palace to see its most beautiful and mysterious corners. Arm in arm, they strolled through the luxurious, fragrant garden and looked at the wondrous fountains shimmering in the sun. Olivia watched in admiration as a butterfly fluttered over a fragrant lavender bush. Edwin, gallantly holding her arm, told her funny stories from his trip to distant lands, his voice soft and velvety, calming and giving a feeling of security. They stopped near a huge field of daisies, a white sea of flowers stretching to the horizon like a carpet woven from moonlight. Here, among the daisies, she felt free and happy, as if she had returned to her carefree childhood. It was a gorgeous back garden, and Olivia had worked hard on it for the past year, planting the soil with little pink flowers. She had previously worked at the Tiage Palace, but she had only been given full powers a year ago, and since then she had been looking after the palace day and night. These little flowers were incredibly beautiful, and the gentleman was delighted with the young lady's efforts. Olivia knew that this day spent among the daisies would forever remain in her heart as a symbol of love, hope, and happiness. Suddenly a lady approached her and wanted to tell her something, asking what brought the Grand Duke here. The Tiage Palace had long been given over to the Crown Prince's bride, and in other words, it was a place inaccessible to all other men. Olivia confidently stated that since she was the owner of the palace, she personally invited the Duke here to show him the incredible beauty. None of them even suspected that once upon a time there had been unwanted guests here who had not even asked permission to visit the beautiful garden, and these people were well known to Olivia. Seeing off the carriage, the lady bowed goodbye and wished the heroes a safe and undisturbed journey home. The place turned out to be truly beautiful, and Edwin would have liked to see more, if not for the annoying trouble at the end, which no one expected. Be that as it may, he admitted, Milady had definitely won when she declared herself the owner of the palace. After this, Olivia felt simply wonderful. She felt incredible lightness in her body and confidence in her words. Edwin had said before that he always remains a winner, and his companion should be exactly the same, self-confident and courageous. Although the gentleman was now flattering the young lady, she could not yet show it and was still embarrassed by her new role. It was still too early to be so self-confident, and she wanted to prove to everyone, especially her family and the emperor, who she really was. Those lands turned out to be too barren for habitation. They were of no value to travelers, and the heroine decided to do some work on the area. The gentleman laughed and asked if she thought he was trying to steal the victory from his lady, since he was actually hoping for something more intangible. A red blush lit up the girl's entire face, and modestly lowering her eyes, she asked Edwin to simply tell her what he really wanted. A variety of thoughts were spinning in her head, from a fleeting kiss to a strong embrace, but she was waiting for the master's answer. Edwin had only asked to be addressed more informally, and that was the only thing he would be incredibly happy about right now. Surprised, Olivia looked into his eyes and couldn't believe that such a small thing was important to him. She kept repeating, "Your Highness, Your Highness," so the gentleman suggested that she try to say his name and still feel free. Edwin was a famous great archduke, and the girl had been called a dirty half-breed all her life, and of course she felt very strange calling him by his name. It was a great honor for her to speak his name, Edwin Lowell Vikander, and it was unlikely that anyone else in the empire was allowed to do so. She spoke the name timidly in a quiet voice, so modestly that her words were almost inaudible. So the gentleman pretended that he had not heard anything at all and asked the girl to say it again, louder. There was nothing shameful in this, and the gentleman did not understand what was stopping the young lady from washing it confidently. Olivia started to deny it, claiming that she had just said his name, but in reality she just felt incredibly shy. With all her strength, she tried to gather herself to say his name again, but her lips seemed to turn to ice and stopped moving altogether. Edwin admitted that he really hadn't heard anything, and continued to look at his companion with a bold smile. They sat next to each other, and Olivia felt his warm presence with her hand, and this made her even more embarrassed. Edwin wanted the lady to feel at ease, and anyway, they were going to get married soon. And it is completely natural for a couple to address each other by name, rather than by title or rank. If they don't act like a couple in love, it will seem even stranger to others, and dirty rumors may start to spread. Olivia knew he was telling the truth, and there was nothing wrong with her simply calling him by his first name. Trusting this man, she was ready to say the name Edwin, but she needed some more time to collect herself and feel comfortable. Suddenly, she looked out the window and turned to the gentleman because she saw something strange that required his attention. A carriage had just pulled up in front of his residence, and Olivia was sure he should check it out because no one was expecting uninvited guests. The gentleman carefully looked out the window so as not to show it, and at that very moment he became wary, as if he realized who was in the carriage. He started acting strange and pulled the curtain, saying that it was too bright for us to see, and the air was so cool at night, so it would be better to pull the curtain. It all seemed a bit suspicious, and Edwin said that they needed to go somewhere else right now. Olivia didn't understand at all what was happening and why they couldn't get out of the carriage right next to his residence. She didn't see whose carriage had arrived, she couldn't even guess, but to her great horror she heard a familiar voice calling her name. Edwin tried his best to leave as quickly as possible so that Olivia would not meet this man, but he was already demanding that the girl immediately get out of the carriage, knowing that this is where she was. As soon as she pulled back the curtain, she saw her hated brother, who was very eager to meet her right now. He seemed angry to me, didn't shout, and only asked his sister to get out of the carriage so they could talk about everything calmly. As soon as she saw him, a cold shiver ran through her whole body, and she was very afraid that their conversation would again not be very pleasant, like all the previous times. The gentleman asked if Olivia was ready to talk to the sir, since they could leave at any time, and she could simply not get out of the carriage. The young man looked straight out the window, waiting for his sister to finally decide and come out to talk. Olivia was going to send him away so that he would never come back again, and she knew that this conversation absolutely had to happen right now. Edwin could not contradict her opinion, and since the lady really wanted it, he was ready to do anything to make her feel good. Since the young man was on the territory of the master's residence, Edwin immediately warned that he had chosen an extremely unfortunate time for the conversation. Now the young man did not look so angry. He spoke in a calm voice and turned to his sister Olivia. Edwin whispered in the girl's ear that he would definitely be there, and if he was needed, she could call him immediately if something happened. Hearing these words, the brother replied who Edwin takes him for and behaves as if he is some kind of bandit. And an outsider like Edwin shouldn't worry about it at all, because the matter concerns only Madeline's family. When he said the word family, Olivia's hands began to shake because there was absolutely nothing left of that family. All that remained was disappointment and broken fragments of the heart, which still pierced the girl's body like a point, giving her no peace. The brother and sister stood opposite each other, silently, at a distance, and Olivia certainly didn't want to get closer to him. It was clear that the young man was nervous, and the first thing he asked was what his sister was doing here and whether she really thought it was normal to say that she could erase Madeline from her life and just disappear. Wanting to tell her the most sincere words, he realized that he had been worried all this time, but now he had absolutely no idea what to say, to call her back so as not to worry anymore. But was he worried about Olivia? The little sister was under house arrest for wanting to visit her, and the maid too, so he just wanted to tell them to go home and everything would go back to normal. Olivia didn't wait for pleasant words from him and said that the ledger book was in the second drawer of the desk on the left. Estelle still finds it difficult to read this, and she asked to study the information with the butler Derek. The accounting elements vary depending on the day, and Olivia promised to send an email with information about them soon. Probably the brother wanted to talk about family relationships, but certainly not about official palace affairs. After her words, the young man only asked her to stop, and this was not what he expected to hear, because Olivia had now simply decided to hand over her responsibilities. She once again admitted that she never intended to return to Madeleine, where she had been thrown out in disgrace. So now she decided to lay everything out clearly in order to avoid problems in the future, so that they would never see each other again. Olivia's soul was torn apart. One part of her wanted a quiet family life, while the other knew the harsh reality of how she had been deceived. The brother still couldn't resist and dared to push the girl lightly, which is what she basically expected from him. The rage in his eyes was gradually growing, and what could one say about family relationships, about respect, and even more so about love? He shouted what had happened to her. She always put up with everything before, but now she had become a completely different person. Olivia was always so unbending, forgiving all insults, and now she decided to run away because of some nonsense. The young man spoke angrily, but for Olivia this was not nonsense at all. It was a lie, a dirty deception, and a betrayal that she would never forgive. She called him Sir Madeleine, and never even said his name, speaking only in a formal tone. This made the young man even more angry, and he asked her to never call him that, because Olivia was also a part of Madeleine. He could not believe that the girl was leaving their family forever, breaking all ties and relationships with the people with whom she had lived for many years. She addressed him as you, so that he would understand the reality of what was happening, and all her life she was bent solely for the sake of her family. Now there was only pain and despair in her heart, and she would not allow herself to be treated like that anymore. And throughout her life, devoting herself to the good of her family, the noble Olivia did everything in her power to preserve the love and warmth that had previously connected them. Perhaps someday these people would have noticed her, someday they would have appreciated her efforts, but unfortunately it is too late. Olivia believed that one day her brothers and sister, as well as her father, would be on her side, but now she begins a new chapter that does not include Madeleine's family. The brother was sure that as soon as he came, his sister would melt and forget all the grievances, but she was already too deep to forgive them. She laughed and asked if she returned, they would finally recognize her as a member of the family and stop calling her a dirty half-breed, guilty of her mother's death. There was no need for this. She would never return there again, and her brother could forever forget about what had ever connected them. Olivia looked incredibly happy and admitted that she felt she would soon have a real loving family. And when Edwin heard these words, his body was filled with warmth, because now she was talking about him, about the ducal house, and about its inhabitants who respected her. Turning around, the lady said goodbye forever to her brother, who had once been everything to her, a piece of her soul, her most beloved weakness. He did not interfere in the conversation under any circumstances. He was sure that Olivia would cope perfectly well on her own, and would make it clear to her brother that it was all over now. The gates closed in front of the gentleman. He stood for some time near the ducal palace and could not believe that this was really the point. Breakups always come with a powerful emotion, and Olivia finally felt a huge sense of relief, as if a heavy stone in her soul had simply dissolved. Edwin immediately approached the girl and asked if everything was okay with her, but Olivia looked even much better, and her face was shining with happiness. This conversation turned out to be quite difficult, and the gentleman was well aware of this, because Olivia had allegedly been connected to these people by blood ties all her life. Here he turned out to be a little wrong, and instead of heaviness, Olivia felt an unreal sensation of lightness and freedom, because there was warmth and kindness in her heart, and she was ready to give herself entirely to her new loving family, without reserve, forever. At that moment, she seemed to be freed from all the shackles that bound her. She pulled Edwin by the hand and finally called him by name. His name sounded with such incredible tenderness, and even the gentleman himself did not expect such freedom from Olivia. The happiness in her eyes was impossible to describe in words. She fluttered like a butterfly, feeling like an airy cloud. She called him Edwin again, and came close enough to him to feel the man who truly wanted the best for her. The stunned young man, his cheeks flushed, looked at Olivia, who had literally transformed beyond recognition in a minute. This is what a free soul looked like, and Olivia asked if there was something wrong with her. In fact, for some time he doubted that the lady would actually call him by his name and agree to such a condition. Just this evening, in the carriage, he himself asked to be addressed by his first name, and Olivia was worried that he might not like it. The gentleman was simply incredibly embarrassed to such an extent that he even behaved like a little boy. With the eyes of a naive puppy, he asked Olivia in a velvety voice to continue calling him that, and he was ready to listen to it for an eternity. Olivia and Edwin stood close, their lips too close. They both felt their hearts beating faster and their breathing becoming uneven. But suddenly servants came out of the palace. They moved away from each other, trying to maintain a calm appearance, as if nothing special had happened. They stood near the entrance with joyful smiles, and the butler politely invited the gentleman and his companion to enter, and it was getting quite cool outside. Confused, Olivia ran into the palace as fast as if a crowd of bandits were chasing her, and Edwin completely covered his face with his hands and declared that he would first go for a walk. The air was incredibly fresh, and the weather was pleasant outside. Olivia felt tired after the conversation, but at the same time, in her heart, there was a glimmer of hope for the best, for the changes that were about to happen. Edwin, his eyes full of warmth and understanding, his gentle touches, his quiet voice, like music that sounded only for her. A life where she could be herself, where she would be loved and appreciated not for her background, but for who she was. A life with Edwin, full of love, passion, and freedom. Every time she said his name, she couldn't help but smile, as if those letters were somehow especially magical. While Olivia was slowly getting ready for bed, the gentleman had been sitting near a huge tree in the yard all this time, and still couldn't get over the failed kiss. Edwin was a great warrior, but now his heart was fluttering, and he felt too vulnerable, too tender, too kind. Olivia's voice echoed in his head, saying his name while looking at him with loving eyes. Something had changed. The ice that had gripped his heart after the great loss began to melt under the warmth of her presence. He was afraid to admit it to himself, but hope, like a sprout, was breaking through the thickness of the past. He exhaled, gathering his strength, the embarrassment gone, giving way to determination. Edwin headed back to the palace, knowing that he would see that sweet face again. In contrast to the pure and sincere feelings between these heroes, some changes were taking place in the other couple, and lying in the same bed with Maria, the thoughts of the crown prince were somewhere far away. Maria was worried about their relationship, and the young man admitted that one small misfortune had happened that he couldn't stop thinking about. The lady asked if it was all about the Duke's daughter, and Leopold became so agitated for some reason. Leopold admitted that Olivia seemed to have seen them together last Wednesday, and he was definitely sure of it, because Olivia had so impulsively canceled their plans together, and obviously there was a good reason for it. Wrapped in a blanket, Maria asked if Leopold really wanted to say that someone already knew about their secret relationship. Leopold kissed the girl tenderly and asked her not to worry, promising to sort everything out as best he could. If anyone was to blame for the disruption of the schedule, it would definitely be Lady Olivia, the dirty half-breed. He desperately wanted to make her a laughingstock in front of the Madeline family, in front of the emperor, and in front of all the aristocrats. Leopold was a rather self-confident young man, and he thought that for such a simpleton, Olivia was making things too complicated, and besides, she trembled at his very word. Throwing on a white satin shirt, he asked Maria to confirm his opinion that everything would be exactly as he wanted. Everything had to go according to a certain scenario, and Olivia, on that same Wednesday, as usual, looked at the valuable porcelain service, which was taken out only once a week. Mustard warned Milady that it was time to go to the garden, to the very same gazebo where last week the vile Leopold sat with another girl. Now Olivia's heart was already calm, and she was ready to look the impudent deceiver in the eyes with complete confidence. She had been warned that His Highness would not arrive soon, and the girl still had a little time to be alone with herself. Leopold went to take a hot bath immediately after getting out of bed after spending a wonderful night with Maria. Enough time had passed, and the maid began to worry that Olivia would become angry because the master was still not there. Every time he made her wait until the last minute, and he always thought only about himself, and it is unlikely that he ever thought about anyone else in his life. Soon the servants greeted the younger son of the empire, and the venerable gentleman finally paid his presents. He entered the living room, and Olivia was about to greet him as befits the son of a great emperor. Leopold asked to omit all formalities, and with one gesture showed that he did not want to hear it at all. Leopold was sure that the girl felt guilty that she had left early yesterday, but unexpectedly the lady said that she had come to see him for the last time. And today is the day when she would like to talk, so that after that she can finally break off the engagement and the upcoming wedding. A wicked grin appeared on Leopold's face, as if this was all he had been waiting for, mocking the girl again. He laughed out loud, showing how pathetic she was and how she was talking incredible nonsense. "I didn't expect anything else." Olivia continued to stand there with a calm, peaceful face, and didn't even try to react to the nasty behavior. She silently looked into his lying eyes and waited to see what this fool had prepared this time to justify his dirty actions and vile soul. Leopold asked why he shouldn't just tell me honestly that Olivia was acting this way only because she was simply jealous of Lady Maria. People wondered if that was all he could say to her right now, and if his words were stupid and absurd. She didn't even hope for an apology. She just wanted a little basic politeness from the person with whom they still had something in common. Leopold asked if the lady wanted him to invite her on a date, and was even willing to organize a pleasant event. He just wanted Olivia to stop opening her stupid mouth, and there was nothing important in her words to him. He sat down leisurely on the leather sofa and asked what it was like to contact the Grand Duke, and so unexpectedly. Olivia stood silently by while this nasty man with the eyes of a beast tried to get something out of her, just to get her emotional. She remained silent, and the young man declared how pleasant it was to see her so obedient. Leopold wanted to know if she was serious about breaking off the engagement, if she really believed the Grand Duke, and if she was still so naive. Olivia was already 20 years old, and Leopold still didn't even know her exact age, calling her a 19-year-old simpleton. He didn't even know the age of his supposed beloved, who was to become his legal wife in the future. As Olivia stood behind him, Leopold felt something strange, as if she was no longer the shy, naive girl who could be easily controlled. The puppet, which had always been controllable in his tenacious hands, finally broke all the thin strings that he had previously pulled with ease. From the age of 9, little Olivia's heart was given to only one person, the Crown Prince, with whom she was supposed to have a real wedding. And it all seemed like a given until Olivia received Edwin's vow one day, and until now she was just a bird in a cage. Leopold realized that the puppet was becoming uncontrollable, and he was slowly overcome by anger and a desire to get his favorite toy back. Even in response to her awkward laughter, he sternly declared that she really didn't know social manners and continued to laugh when there was someone else around. Speaking of bad manners, Olivia admitted that this applied to Mr. Leopold much more than to her. Sitting down opposite him, she stated that it was not he who had recently brought Lady Maria to her property without even asking the owner's permission. Leopold slowly began to blush, because Olivia was right now boldly accusing him of actions that he actually committed. The conversation was gradually becoming tense, and Olivia mentioned this, believing that the gentleman still valued honesty and respect. Leopold slammed the table loudly and walked closer to the unperturbed Olivia, asking her to stop her hysteria immediately before he actually broke off the engagement. He decided that he had had enough for today and warned the lady to try to refrain from stupid and reckless actions. Leopold was sure he had already told her a lot that Olivia should understand, considering how obsessed she had been with this engagement all her life. Olivia said confidently that the engagement would be broken off in the near future, and she was no longer considering any other options. Leopold could not believe it. His status and title depended on this engagement, and it was the Duke's daughter who was to become his wife. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the young man asked who had made such an important decision. After all, there is someone else whom the Lord wishes to make his empress, and Olivia has declared that the engagement will be mutual. The lady knew her place quite well. Now she was confident in herself and would never again fall for the tricks of a dirty deceiver. Leopold only thought that the girl's jealousy had gone too far. Could she really have managed to overhear some conversation? At the time of their meeting, in her own domain in the palace of Tiage, Olivia revealed that the gentleman had a secret meeting with Lady Maria. She saw everything with her own eyes and told the gentleman the whole truth, and at that moment he angrily jumped up from the sofa and began to scream so furiously that even the mountains would have trembled from his hatred. Olivia knew this man very well. He could do anything, even hit a fragile girl. Today she was not alone here, and the great Archduke Edwin prevented the master from committing the most terrible crime. The prized porcelain mug fell to the floor and shattered, and Edwin mockingly praised the empire's youngest son. Leopold was outraged that the young man dared to behave inappropriately in the palace of the crown prince's bride. Here Olivia intervened, admitting that it was she who had invited the gentleman to her palace, and that he was there completely legally. This palace was once given to a girl, and she became its rightful owner. After announcing her desire to break off the engagement, Olivia intended to meet his lordship, and that is why she asked him to come at the appointed time. She thought that this palace belonged to her, but in reality everything turned out to be completely different. So, for the last time, she decided to use her powers to put an end to such a fabulous time, and Olivia believed that she made the best choice in her life. Leopold's words did not touch her soul in any way. She had been indifferent to him for a long time, and his deception would come back to him, destroying him completely. Leopold's anger reached its limit, and he shouted at Olivia to stop saying those words immediately. Even his rage did not touch the girl in any way, and she only sighed with relief, seeing a small, angry, stupid boy in front of her. She once again conveyed her praises to the younger son of the empire, and taking the venerable Lord Edwin by the arm, she was about to leave this place forever. The lady promised to greet Leopold soon as Grand Duchess Vikander, and wished him luck in his new happy life without her. Leopold still could not understand whether Olivia had really made such a decision and would leave him, and whether the engagement was truly broken off forever. Their relationship was once magical. The heroes first met when Olivia was only 9 years old. At 14, she was unable to give him a precious handkerchief when he first left for the main battle for the good of the empire. At 18, she had no doubt that her first dance at the debutante ball would be with Leopold, and every year she eagerly awaited this magical moment. At the age of 20, in her own home, which she certainly considered her place, her fiancé, not her faithful one, swore his love to another in a cozy corner. It was a love story only from her side, and behind her there were blatant lies and deceit, but Olivia put her heart back together piece by piece. And now she was only interested in one stupid question: did her back look normal when she walked away proudly? Because it was the first time she left someone behind like that. It felt really strange, and Olivia had previously been a timid girl who trusted Leopold's every word and was confident in his fidelity. And now she decided to take a step into a new happy life, and right now he was looking intently at her back. The young man laughed and said that her back was as magnificent as always, and the lady certainly didn't have to worry about it. Finally, when the main point with Leopold was put, the young man confessed, Olivia began to look even more charming, and finally she was completely free. Perhaps they would face a difficult situation in front of the emperor. Many would be against this union, but now they walked holding on to each other, with faith in their souls and the most wonderful feelings. The next day the heroes arrived to the emperor, but at the moment His Majesty was busy with important state affairs, as his assistant reported. On this day the emperor ordered that no one should be admitted, but he knew very well about the arrival of Edwin and Olivia. 3 whole hours had already passed in agonizing anticipation, and Edwin's rage was growing more and more with every minute. He asked his assistant to go and check on His Majesty again and convey that Grand Duke Vikander had arrived to receive his promise. The master's anger could not be hidden, and many people in the empire heard how harsh this man could be. One of the emperor's courtiers decided to take responsibility and go to find out if the emperor was ready to receive guests. Edwin wanted to get what he wanted today, because it was not without reason that he had agreed to meet with the emperor on this very day. The lady felt that the young man was angry, but she tried in every possible way to support and calm him down. She even suggested that they come back later in that case, admitting that she had already gotten a little tired while waiting. Edwin always got what he wanted here and now, but this time he decided to listen to his companion. And since she was truly tired, he decided to show leniency and visit the emperor another day. Before leaving, he cast an angry glance at the emperor's servants so that they would understand that this meeting must definitely take place. The heroes headed for the exit, and the aristocrats, who were having a banquet downstairs, immediately noticed them. Everyone started whispering about why these two appeared together and whether Olivia was really going to marry the Grand Duke. The Crown Prince had only one choice to choose his youngest daughter, Madeline, as his wife. The gentleman was informed that the Grand Duke had left without waiting for the meeting, and that all this had been arranged on purpose. The young man thought that Edwin had brought him Isla Rutan only to get his hands on the white quartz mines, and that was why he had handed them over to the princess. Now he understood that this damn fox dared to deceive him only to fulfill his cherished desire. And he spent his cherished desire to propose to Lady Madeline, although he could have asked for absolutely anything, even mountains of gold. When the baby was still very young, she was introduced to the master and asked to accept her as the bride of the Crown Prince, since the blood of Madeline flowed in her veins. The father then informed the master that he could count on the loyalty of Madeline's house and promised that their plan would definitely work. Unfortunately, little Olivia had no idea that they were actually just going to sell her as a wife. Not only was the gentleman now undermining the loyalty of the duchy, but he was also flaunting it like an impudent, stupid mongrel. The emperor's wife approached him, noticing that he was in some strange, uncertain state. The lady asked him what was bothering him, since stress was damaging his beautiful face. The gentleman told her that the Grand Duke had come and asked for his permission to marry the lady. Sighing, the Empress replied, "This scoundrel probably just forgot where his place was." It is true that the wish was promised by the emperor, but it is difficult to say that if he allows it to be done, it may affect the relationship with the Duchy of Madeline. Ancient texts say that a woman once betrothed to a member of the imperial family cannot marry another nobleman for a year to avoid any problems with the origins of future heirs. And in that case, the Empress proposed to allow them to get engaged only after a year. A year would be enough to make a good plan, and the master was planning to either return the first daughter to her former place or choose the second as the new princess. There was a fierce struggle for the girls, and each of them could play a huge role for the good of the empire. The younger one turned out to be quite sincere, and returning the older model would be the best option. The Empress was curious to understand what was currently going on between these two. The question remains whether the young lady agreed to the Grand Duke's proposal. The Emperor listened to his wife's words and said that she was very attached to the Crown Prince. And to think that such a smart woman is now on his side, and this gives him another chance to crush the Grand Duke. He was sure the child would end up like his father, and he waited impatiently for his beautiful little face to finally contort in despair. The lady soon learned that Olivia had personally demanded that the engagement be broken, and that this had happened just recently. She never treated Olivia as a worthy aristocrat who would be able to make insidious plans in the future. Once upon a time, she was an ordinary naive girl, especially without a good pedigree. And what else could you expect from a pathetic half-breed who swore her sincerity, but in reality turned out to be such a superficial, shameless, and impudent flirt? The Empress declared that the marriage would not be postponed for 1 year, and she decided to go to His Majesty and demand the dissolution of the engagement and a replacement of the bride. She wanted the Duke to suffer as his innocent daughter withered more and more with each passing year. On the way, she ran into the Crown Prince, who looked upset, which was definitely not like him. He asked Her Majesty what brought her here, and she heard that the half-breed dared to be insolent to him. The lady asked His Majesty for a 1-year postponement of the marriage, but this cannot be allowed. Olivia must be rejected, and Madeline must be made the main bride. A woman previously betrothed to a member of the imperial family is not allowed to marry another nobleman for a year to ensure the purity of the heir's blood. By the time the meeting was scheduled at the Tiaji Palace, the gentleman had already had a secret meeting with Lady Maria. The lady was going to give her a chance since she had good skills despite her background. Leopold happily supported this idea, since he already knew this girl quite well, even much better than many knew about it. He called Maria a simple and stupid, naive girl who could be compared to dust on the road, and Leopold was confident that he could fool any aristocrat. In exchange for this time, in order to maintain the balance between the factions of the emperor and the nobility, he offered to make Maria his bride. The empress didn't even expect that her smart son would come up with such a wonderful idea. Olivia's life started with a clean slate, and today she and the gentleman were in a dress salon. The second dress resembled a lily, and the design was developed to highlight the jeweled neckline. Edwin asked if there was another dress, and the salon owner offered a catalog of new items. Edwin decided to look at some more options and asked Olivia if something was wrong. Standing in a luxurious black dress embroidered with crystal beads, Olivia thought it could be called too much. She suggested that Madame drink some fresh tea so as not to rush with the choice and take a closer look at all the outfits. It turned as soon as Madame left, Olivia became indignant. She was already trying on her 15th dress, and Edwin still couldn't stop. The young man decided to remind her that the lady herself had spoken about her high standards in choosing gifts. Recently, a young man asked her to tell him about her preferences, but she didn't even pay attention to it. That's why once upon a time she really dreamed of wearing luxurious dresses every day, just like her little sister. The lady was sure that the seamstress had definitely already been to the duchy when she made an order for her younger sister. The young man laughed and couldn't even be angry at the lady, because her face seemed to be asking for forgiveness. The lady admitted that before leaving the Duke's residence, she ordered a dress for her little sister from the same boutique, and now she remembered it. It seemed that she worried about her every day. She could not forget her, because for her she was the only and sincere person. The Duke was not at all mistaken in his words, and Olivia really did miss Ursula, her beloved little sister. The young man made puppy eyes and asked her to pay him a little more attention, because if she continued to ignore him, he would be upset. But one word was enough to settle everything. Olivia suddenly thought that it had been quite some time since she and the Duke had declared themselves a couple. Come to think of it, he had never called her by her name, and now she decided to talk to him about it. The gentleman's ears burned with a bright fire, and he said that Olivia had not given him permission for this and had never asked for it herself. Indeed, caught up in her business, the lady missed this moment, but she did not understand why the Duke could not do it himself. He could have just called her by her name first, and then everything would have been fine. And she would be very happy if the master also called her by name, as if it were something priceless. And only now, when it became the most important moment, Edwin said her name Olivia, in such a gentle voice that one could drown in it. For him, her name was truly the most beautiful in the world, and he had wanted to say this for a long time. They touched each other's fingers, confessing that for some reason their names were truly special, and it makes them happy, even when they just say each other's names, and the corners of Olivia's lips lift up playfully. Edwin had never felt anything like this before, and when he said her name, he felt like he was in seventh heaven. The event also required shoes and jewelry, but the lady refused, as her closet was already overflowing with purchased outfits. Her entire dowry, just one abandoned mine. She couldn't take that much, but she still had jewelry, and she kept that pink diamond necklace. Since the last banquet, she had never worn it and simply admired its beauty every day. It really was like that. The jewelry was in a jewelry box, and Olivia didn't even wear it. The gentleman noticed that every time she remembered her sister, her eyes filled with sadness. Because, as she said, her heart is still filled with grief, and if her sister had listened to her that time, everything would have been different. She didn't understand why her beloved little sister didn't listen to anything then, succumbing to her father's emotions and oppression. Didn't she really listen to her? Olivia always pushed her away, and time and again, repeating the next time, tea drinking, going to coffee shops, the debut, all the places she so wanted to visit. Even so, she was still hurt by those words that the only truth was that her mother died because of Olivia. She must really never want to see her again now, but Olivia was hurt and sad, and perhaps she even hated her. She still wanted to see her, to hug her sweet little sister, and say all the words that she still kept in her heart. Edwin understood that this was a very important and sensitive issue for Olivia, and Madeleine's Duke's house turned out to be quite lucky. And their youngest daughter was the luckiest of all, despite the rest of the relatives, to whom there are no longer any questions. Suddenly the gentleman said the young lady arrived at the estate, and Olivia couldn't believe her ears. Little Estella said that she wanted to see Olivia and came especially to talk to her and tell her the whole truth. It rained heavily that night, as if it was trying to wash away all the terrible things that had happened recently. A lady in a wet raincoat stood on the threshold and said her name, Estella Madeline. She asked the knight to tell her sister that she was right on the threshold of the palace and desperately wanted to meet her. The young man wondered whether he should let this girl in, because after all, she was from the Madeline family, with whom Olivia no longer had anything in common. He wondered if he should really tell the lady that she had come all this way just for one conversation. Miss Olivia was incredibly kind, so the knight was sure she would definitely agree to the meeting. Yet the lady came here, forgetting about respect, but the young lady did not even think about it. The knight was right, which means he cares about his sister even more than she does, and now he is more than her own family. The butler came out and announced that Milady had allowed the girl to pass if she promised not to expect anything in return. Estella immediately agreed to any condition, expecting nothing, just to come in and finally see her sister. It was a small condition, and now she was ready to do anything just to talk to her. Estella was afraid and thought that maybe it would be better if Olivia didn't have to, and the only thing she could say was that she was very sorry. I am very sorry for the words that should not have been said, for blaming her for her mother's death, for knowing how her father and brothers treated her, and for my inaction, for forcing her 8-year-old sister, who was afraid of ghosts, to sleep in the attic one day, for playing with her, even though she knew that her brothers and father scolded her every time. But despite this, Olivia always managed to smile a sincere and kind smile, and her younger sister remembered every tender look she gave her. She got scared and decided to come another time, not with such a superficial apology, but with a carefully thought-out letter. As soon as she took her cloak, Olivia herself appeared in front of her, still the same gentle sister, but already a proud woman. They hadn't seen each other for too long, and the younger sister was very nervous when she saw Olivia. There was still the same tender, trembling warmth in her eyes, and not a drop of anger, despite all the circumstances. The young lady didn't know where to start the conversation, and with childish naivety, she began to mumble something about wanting to apologize for so many things. She extended her hand to her, apologizing, but Olivia did not extend her hand back. She wanted to apologize for a lot of things, but she could only apologize for showing up so suddenly. The lady confessed that she had come to ask for forgiveness, and it was a great pity that she had not had time to warn, and that she should not have stood aside and watched the treatment of her father and brothers. Estella asked Olivia not to suffer in the imperial palace for her, and it was not worth leaving her all alone in that terrible attic on the 4th floor. Olivia looked tenderly at her beloved sister, and she didn't even think of being angry at her for anything, realizing that the girl herself found herself in the cruel intrigue of her father and brothers. Large drops of water ran down her face, and the little girl proudly uttered words of apology, looking into Olivia's eyes. She was so afraid of this moment, and closed her eyes, but her older sister just poked her in the forehead, like a little girl. After all, these words mean that she was truly at fault, and took full responsibility for her actions. Olivia hugged Estella tenderly, and she understood perfectly well that she had absolutely no part in anything, and had not plotted these dirty schemes. It was not her fault at all. She turned out to be just a puppet in the hands of her father and brothers, and the ducal family. Therefore, the lady was not at all angry with her little sister, because she never wished her any harm, and they were one soul, and nothing has changed since then. Just like in childhood, Olivia confessed to her sister that she had done nothing wrong and should not feel guilty under any circumstances. Her childish, naive eyes reflected sincere love and the anxiety that had tormented her in recent days. Circumstances developed in such a way that she had to make a choice that affected the entire family, a choice that led to discord and misunderstanding. She hugged Estella again, feeling her heart fill with hope that their family could survive this difficult time and emerge even stronger. Someone still wanted to spoil this pleasant moment, and suddenly someone knocked on the living room door. The butler reported that young Mr. Madeline was standing at the main gate and he wanted to talk to Olivia. It was already quite late. Olivia assumed it was high time for the young lady to go to bed. And indeed, it was impossible to be late and stay late, but there was one more question that the young lady would like to ask right now. Estella pulled back and looked at Olivia with a seriousness that belied her age. Standing before each other, the future one soul in two bodies, Estella asked if her sister would never return to Madeline's estate again. They were still together despite everything, and suddenly Olivia asked if this thing really belonged to her. In her hands was the very necklace that her sister had angrily thrown away when they had their last conversation about their mother's death. Now Estella happily accepted the precious thing that Olivia had given her from the bottom of her heart, and with a noble soul. Of course, Olivia wanted to give this gift last time, but then everything turned out too unpredictably. And today was the perfect moment when her little sister asked Olivia to put a beautiful necklace on her neck. There was a small scratch on the necklace when Estella had thrown it menacingly against the wall, but it was just a useless trifle now. It was just a reminder and proof of what she had once done, and what path she had now taken. It was a regret she had to bear alone, so she liked the necklace incredibly much as it was, with its small crack that did not affect its beautiful appearance in any way. All this time, young Mr. Madeline was waiting for his younger sister in the carriage, looking menacingly at the ducal mansion in which Olivia now lived. Olivia carefully fastened the pearl necklace with a huge red ruby on her beloved sister's neck. It was the complete opposite of the last time, when it was her little sister who put the necklace on her. The young lady could not contain her sincere emotions and burst into tears, and Olivia understood her feelings perfectly. Now her elder sister lived in the Duke's house with other people, noble and kind. Every resident of the ducal house treated the girl who suddenly became part of their family with great respect. The most important thing is that she finally found a person who appreciates her soul, kindness, and sincerity. Estella continued to cry, and the only question that worried her was whether she was still her little sister. Even though they lived in different houses and belonged to different families, Olivia still considered the young lady to be her closest person. If they are forbidden to see each other, until the very end, until death, their connection will be unbreakable. Olivia hugged her beloved sister and admitted that even without a common last name, they would forever remain sisters, faithful to each other, two kindred spirits. Trying to contain her joyful emotions so that her brother would not understand anything, the young lady got into the carriage, and it was impossible to hide the smile on her face. The gentleman stated menacingly that he was sure his father had told him never to come here again and never to communicate with this girl again. And if he finds out that Stella visited Olivia, she won't get off with a simple house arrest. The young lady followed her heart and confidently declared that she had to do what she wanted. The brothers are used to it. The girl always does their will, and she never had her own opinion. And now, she was no longer the foolish girl who followed her deceitful brothers and her impudent father. The lady stated that the young man could have come and picked her up himself when this terrible situation occurred. He remained indifferent when Olivia always supported him despite her father's anger, and he could certainly have worried more. He could have been more worried, but unfortunately all his feelings were insincere. He was much more worried about his own sister, but Estella had never seen him be so nice to Olivia, or show even a little bit of kindness, and perhaps everything could have turned out differently. The young man didn't understand what was going on in this girl's head, but Estella believed that Olivia had done nothing to deserve being treated this way. It was as if he had been struck by lightning as soon as his younger sister uttered these strange words. The young man was sure that with Olivia's arrival, the family's happiness had shattered into pieces, and these tiny fragments could not be put back together. Then my mother died, my father threw himself into work, and the family fell apart into little pieces. And Jade, releasing his anger, rushed from one battlefield to another, so as to somehow not feel the mental pain. And now Conrad asked his sister if she really still claimed that the green-eyed girl had done nothing for their family. It seems that the only person in the family who never misses an opportunity is Estella's younger sister, Madeline. The carriage slowly drove away from the ducal palace, and from that moment on, little Estella's new life also began. Olivia and Edwin watched them go, and each of them was incredibly happy that the girl had plucked up the courage to come here. Edwin joked that at this rate the gates of the ducal estate would become a gathering place for Madeline's family. Conrad, Lady Estella, and even Jade have already been here to talk to Olivia. The lady found this incredibly funny, and indeed it seemed so, because every day someone from the family was always there. Even though the young gentleman had come for his younger sister, Olivia was confident that everything would be fine now. Looking up at the night sky, she felt truly happy, because now, wherever she went and wherever she ended up, there would be one person by her side. This man, Edwin, the great master of the empire, who will never again abandon it or leave it in trouble. Olivia knew he would come and take her away, anytime, anywhere, and she would never be in danger again. The young man wondered what he should do now, even though he knew how easily she influenced him. He has no choice but to submit to this gentle girl, who captivated his heart from the first seconds. The time had come to discuss the terms of the 1-year deferment, such was the will of His Majesty, and from here they laid down that within this year he must either return his first daughter, or appoint a second bride and a crown prince. That was the whole point of the great dispute. At the meeting it was discussed that the Duke would not propose to his youngest daughter, whom he doted on, but who knows, in the end she was crazy about His Highness, and the Crown Prince decided to make an important announcement that Maria would be his bride. The stupid girl didn't even suspect what kind of insidious plan her so-called lover was drawing her into. Hearing this, Maria was incredibly happy, and she believed this man with all her heart. She had long dreamed about this, but due to her naivety, she did not even imagine what terrible grief could await her in the future. The lady was incredibly delighted, and Leopold asked if she would then be ready to play the role of his chosen one for a year without any problems. These words sounded strange, he admitted. It was only for the time of Olivia's absence during the year-long deferment. And at that moment, Maria remembered with horror Olivia's words when she offered her to become Leopold's pathetic lover. There was no talk of love and mutual happiness here, and Maria was only asked to play the role of the bride. Maria loved this man incredibly. She was sure they would have a wonderful family, but now she was being offered to become a puppet for selfish plans. The next day, Olivia, inhaling the scent of a beautiful bouquet, asked Edwin if he was sure he didn't need to go to the palace. In any case, they would not even be allowed through the door instead. The young man sent a letter informing them that they would arrive tomorrow to receive a blessing. Every Monday morning, a council of nobles would be held at the imperial palace, and Edwin had decided to go there in the afternoon. He looked at Olivia and loudly stated why she was still staring at him and making his heart flutter desperately. She wondered why the gentleman had stopped attending the Council of Nobility, which he was required to attend. The Council of Nobles is a mandatory meeting for all high-ranking nobles, and yet Grand Duke Vicomte has never attended. One day Leopold suggested that Olivia, if she was so smart, should take on the duties of a princess. For some reason she remembered this, and Edwin, with puppy dog eyes, asked if she really wanted him to be present at the meeting. They decided to talk about it, holding hands, and let's say he joins the meeting, but in that case the duchy will come out of this. Olivia suggested that he speak out about the mining taxes, as he had already handed over all his trophies to His Majesty. Her words were indeed true, and there was nothing to argue with. Indeed, the gentleman never thought about taxes, because the Vicanders are already quite rich. However, until Olivia's spending becomes even more extravagant, because now a fun family life awaits them. Olivia asked how the gentleman knew that she was worried about the Grand Duke's taxes, since the topic had never even been raised. And this happened on the very day when the lady restrained herself, buying only 15 luxurious dresses from the new collection at the highest price. The young man burst out laughing, and in that case that changed everything, suggesting that he really should visit the Council of Nobility to stay informed about the situation. He heard Olivia without a doubt. He really heard her, and he didn't even say a single word against her, but simply heard her sincere opinion. If taxes were increased, the duchy would become even richer, and with a wink, the young man offered to take all the remaining shoes from the new collection. For the first time, the gentleman spoke about planning to attend the meeting, deciding to start next Monday today. Only an afternoon reception is planned, and if you think about it, it's annoying that the money they earned is lining the emperor's pockets. His assistant stated that the decision could take them one step further from the white quartz mine, and that they should definitely pay attention to the princess. Edwin ordered that the mine and His Highness's movements be kept under surveillance so that he would be aware of all developments if anything happened. The imperial family will never understand the true location of these lands, and it is unlikely that their stupid heads will be ready to delve into it. When the order was given to the assistant, the butler brought a letter from the palace which was sent to Edwin. Right now, he was being called to a morning council. The letter said that the upcoming marriage would be discussed, but there was no talk of any morning council. There was only less than an hour left, but Olivia seemed in no hurry, and Edwin asked if she didn't need time to get ready. The gentleman, overjoyed, asked her not to worry, and even if they arrived later, there was nothing to worry about. Their late arrival would only be the fault of the emperor, who had sent the notice too late. It was obvious that the letter had been deliberately sent late. The emperor was probably plotting something, but the main characters were always late. Edwin decided not to rush anywhere and suggested having breakfast first and then getting ready calmly, since before an important event you need to eat well. Olivia happily supported him and decided to calmly get herself in order, understanding that she was definitely not in any danger if she was next to Edwin. The heroes still haven't arrived at the meeting, and of course it's not for nothing that the emperor sent the message only an hour ago, considering it just another fun thing. Father had warned that he would have a serious conversation with the young lady before today's council, and the emperor assumed that the conversation was unlikely to go well. Maria Ethel's father was present at the meeting, and it was impossible not to look at his face with disgust, and he was sure that Lady Madeline had become a little carried away. He stated that rumors had already begun to circulate about her inappropriate residence at the Grand Duke's estate, and now she was late for the council, to which the emperor had personally invited her. It was pure arrogance, which was why the noble faction was so useless, and he thought the best choice for the crown prince would be Madeline's eldest daughter. The noble faction could easily use her illegitimacy against her, but she alone could hand over the family's power to the imperial faction, and it is this woman that Edwin Vicomte so desperately desires. In this case, the emperor decided to postpone the discussion of the year's postponement until the end and begin the council. The gentleman sent dozens of letters asking to discuss this marriage, and no one could wait to see his face with hope for blessing at the gathering of the nobility. It is unlikely that Edwin imagined that the emperor was brazenly going to tell him to his face about a year's delay. Maria's father suggested that His Grace the Grand Duke must be very busy and had lost track of time, and even a young lady will be more punctual, and his daughter never allowed herself to do that. The tension at the meeting was growing, and the emperor could not resist telling about his plans. There was constant whispering in the hall, and His Majesty asked for silence. The heroes touched each other's hands and finally appeared before the emperor at the first meeting. The proud couple looked majestic and solemn, as if they were made for each other. The Grand Duke saluted the son of the empire, placing his hand on his chest, and paid homage to the great lord. He immediately hinted at the delay, and had been expecting it from the very beginning of the council, but the heroes arrived only now. Edwin reported that indeed the invitation from His Majesty had arrived quite recently, and he was sure that there was no malicious intent in such a late dispatch. Everyone knew perfectly well why the emperor sent the invitation so late. After a long time, Father finally met Lady Olivia, who no longer looked like a doll that the whole family played with. Edwin felt confident even before the emperor, while everyone bowed and feared even his gaze. The man wondered if the Duke had just made an accusation against him, hidden yet so obvious. Of course, Edwin had no intention of arguing with the emperor. He was simply late for the first meeting and asked to be notified properly next time so that he could arrive on time. There might not be a next time, and the emperor was well aware of this. And all this time he deliberately did not allow the Duke to attend the meeting in order to prevent him from organizing his own faction, and today he called him so that the student could have a scandal about the engagement. The emperor could not summon the busy Grand Duke to every council meeting. The young man bowed before his master, the battles were already over, and he promised to protect the interests of His Majesty as the head of House Vikander. The emperor doubted how sincerely the gentleman wanted to attend the Council of Representatives of the nobility, and if he continued to be so impudent, then marriage with the young lady, not to mention the white quartz mines, would definitely not belong to him. Edwin suggested that negotiations with Ghiberti were the best option to begin fulfilling his official duties. And only now did Olivia understand what he had meant when he hinted that she would be extremely surprised at the first meeting. The gentleman could not warn her in advance, but he immediately said that perhaps she would be a little surprised when they entered there, and the emperor himself prevented the Grand Duke from being present at the council. Does he really need to be so careful? Otherwise there must be another good reason. The emperor proposed to discuss this matter in due course. The last point for today concerns the wedding between Duke Vikander and Miss Madeline, and as they wished, the emperor approved their marriage. However, there is a proper condition that must be met, which the emperor has not warned about before. The heroes held their breath, because any dirty trick could be expected from His Highness. The gentleman stated that a woman previously engaged to a member of the imperial family cannot have relations with another member of the nobility for 1 year. He assumed Olivia didn't suspect anything about it, but the lady agreed. She was well aware of this condition, and was also well aware of how maliciously such a rule could be used. Since the imperial decree had previously promised to fulfill this wish, then so be it. Now the emperor ordered that the annual period be strictly observed so as not to violate the rules of the empire. Not wanting to part with his precious younger daughter, the father will have no choice but to bring the eldest back during this time. Olivia said that it just so happened that she had already planned the wedding preparations, and it would take about a year, and as the emperor had proclaimed, they would hold a legal marriage ceremony in a year. His Highness was surprised that this stupid girl was really going to obey without complaint. This issue had long been discussed with Hadrian, and they understood perfectly well what a cunning trick the emperor could prepare. Holding the girl's hand, Edwin confessed that he regretted that he could not immediately make Milady a Grand Duchess, but thanks to His Majesty's favor, they could now prepare perfectly. No one present expected that they would accept this condition so easily. Maria's father heard that the young lady was well versed in ancient scriptures and openly stated this. And it seems she doesn't fully understand the meaning of this 1-year deferment, and since she doesn't understand, he decided to explain it in detail. As it was clear to him, the miss should be happy with her engagement to his lordship. However, a misinterpretation of the meaning of this period could cause harm in the future. As a parent, he couldn't help but express his concerns and hoped everyone would understand his words correctly. The inheritance in the imperial family is a matter of particular importance, and it is extremely impudent for the Marquis to speak of it in front of the Grand Duke. But the lady had the status of the Crown Prince's fiancée for 11 whole years. It would have been a problem if no attachment had developed during this time, but the Marquis still tried to add fuel to the fire. He stated that he should pay more attention to his behavior so that no doubts would arise about the legitimacy of the imperial line of succession. Olivia confirmed the Marquis's words. 11 years had passed since she was engaged to the Crown Prince. She had no intention of entering into conflict with the Empire's main villains, and merely meekly agreed to the terms. She also thanked him for the imaginary care coming from someone else's father, and took his words into account. So Olivia confidently declared that she must ask Lady Maria to give the same advice. The Marquis became angry as soon as Lady Olivia expressed her opinion, because he was sure that the girl should remain silent. If an engagement of 11 years could be broken, should not Lady Mary, merely His Highness's partner, be even more careful in her conduct? The Marquis ordered the young lady to watch her language, since Maria was now a bridegroom. Turning to the Marquis, Olivia stated that it was all the more reason to tell Maria everything, because you never know what might happen with an engagement. And they must prevent the spread of unflattering rumors about his lovely daughter. Just think, His Majesty has already found a new candidate for the position of Crown Prince's companion in such a short time. Olivia expressed her gratitude for the favor, which allowed her to prepare for her marriage to the Grand Duke with a light heart. And before these people appeared not just a girl, but a proud and courageous noble lady who was able to stand up for herself. The Emperor announced the end of the meeting, and all high-ranking officials were free for the day. The Emperor's anger could not be hidden. His plan was slowly crumbling, and he angrily drove out everyone present. And he ordered his assistant to call the princess into his reception room to talk about something. The Emperor decided to personally verify one issue, but the princess had no idea what it was about. She felt that the young man was angry, and he had just ordered a re-examination of that abandoned mine. The mine had already been checked numerous times, but the Emperor once again asked that everything be examined thoroughly and a report be issued. The latest report showed that nothing special was found there, but doubts arose in his mind. Everything was exactly like this, and the magicians didn't even have anything to say about the luminous phenomenon in the 7th tunnel. There were many luminous phenomena in the mine, and it was all because of that disgusting report that was provided by this bastard. The princess listened attentively to the Emperor's words, but for some reason she did not answer his question for a long time. The young man said menacingly that this matter was extremely urgent, and he needed information right now. Judging by the princess's frightened expression and her trembling hands, she was hiding some secrets. The fact that the Duke was constantly absent from the meeting was not because he did not want to, but because he could not do otherwise. Silly Olivia was so naive, in the princess's opinion, that she did not even realize the full reality of what was happening. The more perceptive nobles probably guessed that the emperor was deliberately preventing Edwin from attending the council, and dirty rumors would soon spread. When the heroes left the imperial palace, Olivia admitted that she appreciated everything her master did for her, but if he didn't like it, she shouldn't force herself. This is one of her greatest desires, and she would not at all like the gentleman to feel uncomfortable. These were important words for Olivia, but for some reason Edwin only laughed loudly in response to them. Gently hugging the girl by the shoulders, his innocent sweet lady, he looked into her eyes with great care. And he asked what to do with her. She was so kind-hearted, he was sure she had become bolder, but was she really now going to break the promise they had made to each other? Olivia had no intention of doing anything like that, and was surprised when Edwin asked her about it. He did not attend the council because it was a burden to him, and did Olivia really think that he remained on the sidelines only at the will of the emperor? Olivia covered the young man's mouth with her hands because they were in the ducal estate, and he continued to tell the truth. As soon as her warm hands touched his lips, he forgot about everything in the world as the setting sun illuminated them. His sweet expression made it impossible to be angry, and Olivia immediately gave in. She called him shameless, but was that really a bad thing since they were going to get married soon? The young man continued to joke and asked for a carriage to be brought until the fragile lady scolded him again. Edwin gently asked Olivia if she knew what kissing the palm meant, or if she had ever heard such an expression. And while she tried to cover his mouth with her hand, he touched her palm with his lips and simply tenderly kissed it. There was no need for this, and the meaning of the kiss did not change at all regardless of its location, and Olivia could still feel the touch of his tender lips on her palm. It could be called the first kiss between two heroes in love, who did not even yet realize how much they were drawn to each other. The gentleman offered his hand to his future wife, and suggested that they go on an exciting journey together. When she held his hand, she felt protected, loved, and the most important girl in the world. Therefore, every time he suggested that she go somewhere, she was ready to go with him even to the ends of the earth. After some time, the princess, who was recovering from a headache, was ready to give her report again after a short rest. The princess was angry. Count Jubler was still out of place, although he should have been there a long time ago. The maid reported that the gentleman was on leave due to his wife's postpartum fever, but the princess ordered him to be called immediately right now. And he was overcome with panic. The emperor was causing it because of this useless abandoned mine, which had already been given to the half-breed anyway. While she was waiting for one of the important people to arrive, she heard a conversation downstairs about all the duty shifts being shifted. Madeline's father was explaining something to the knights, and for some reason it was at that moment that the princess noticed him. The gentleman looked angry. He had not found peace for a long time, and every day some kind of trouble happened to him. She had already met this man once at a social event. They had never spoken to each other, and she didn't even really know what kind of person he was. Now, looking at the gentleman, the princess thought, because she had never drunk tea with Lord Madeline before. Tea parties are always so delightful for her, where you can learn a lot of new things and also make someone trust you. Even the day when this arrogant girl could not even raise her head in front of the princess remained in her memory. The day when the second duke's youngest daughter fell into despair, her face full of failure and disappointment in her fate. The princess was in quite an interesting mood today, as she was once again ready to weave dirty, insidious plans. Today was just the perfect day to talk to another member of Madeline's family, that Monday when it all begins. She ordered Lord Madeline to be brought to her for a supposedly pleasant tea party so that they could discuss everything, and seeing the disappointed gentleman, the princess realized that he could become another excellent puppet.